Don't come to me afterwards. I know nothing about it, right?
Of course.
Kingdom Come Deliverance is a realistic historical RPG where everything is exactly like it was in medieval times, and I mean exactly. It has a huge open world with an extensive main quest line and around 100 side quests and activities to find everywhere. I played it around its release in 2018 and I remember liking it a lot. The freedom of a medieval open world, the combat, and the really funny bugs were all wonderful. But all I remembered about its story is that it felt unfinished. I wanted to revisit it again to figure out if I was right. Were my initial impressions correct? Did the DLCs add anything of note story-wise? To explore this, I'll go through every quest in this video. First, I'll cover the main quest up until a certain point, then go over every side content and the DLCs, and then finish the main quest. The side content portion is grouped based on the towns and villages, so I look at what there is to do in them one by one. I've also read a bunch of books and studies, so as usual, all the names of the sources will be on the screen when I talk about them, and there's a sources list in the description if you want to read up on certain topics further. Also, things that are obvious, tweets, source links for the wiki screenshots, or untraceables like memes are not gonna be on it. I have a little bit of IRL footage as well, some from other sources like the development update videos, but I'm from the same country as the bad guys of the game. So even though I didn't visit Ratai or any Czech locations, I visited a few castles here and I have some things to show you that are interesting and relevant. Since I started writing this video, a sequel was announced, so you can watch this as a detailed story recap too if you played it a long time ago. I made sure to include a bunch of details you might have missed in the game and interesting historical bits from the time period you might have not heard about. And if you never played it, you will get a thorough overview of what happened in the first game, so you will be well equipped to start the second one. At the end, I go through my hopes and predictions for the sequel as well. Before this detailed story section starts, I go over the main gameplay system so we are all on the same page about how this game even works and the story is not constantly interrupted by descriptions of basic features. The gameplay part is spoiler free, but after that, by nature of story analysis, it's gonna be full of spoilers all the way through. So this is how this video is structured, and let's just get into the gameplay. Kingdom Come Deliverance is an open world RPG, so most of the time will be spent exploring the world and making your character stronger and stronger in the process. To get stronger, you have your main level, but more importantly, there's a skill for basically anything you might do, and you increase these by actually doing the relevant actions. So in the beginning, you will suck at sword fighting, and the only way to get better is to actually practice it. So run from armored attackers or big groups of people and beat up easier targets. Hitting wayfarers is not the most honorable, but we have to learn somewhere, I guess. At certain levels of the skill, you will get to choose a perk as well, to maybe make stealth easier or make alchemy faster. Sometimes these come with downsides or lock you out of other perks, but mostly these will be beneficial. Besides the normal difficulty though, the game has a hardcore mode which adds a bunch of different ways of making the game harder, and one of which is having to choose negative perks that are incurable and will follow you through your playthrough. On normal mode, there's a compass indicator on the top of the screen, a map where you can fast travel between set fast travel points, and quests and NPC markers showing you where to go most of the time. The map indicator follows the person in real time, so if they are walking around, you will know where to go exactly. Fast travel between these points is convenient, but you will have random encounters on the road as well. Sometimes just fellow travelers, sometimes a Riddler, but sometimes enemies too. You have a chance to evade them from the map, but if you fail, you have to escape or fight. Or if you open the map again fast enough while you're still not in combat, you can fast travel again. On hardcore, all of these are missing. There's no fast travel and no compass indicators. So without fast travel, you'll have to rely on your horse and your sense of direction to orient yourself in the world. You can imitate fast travel by speeding through the forest on a horse like a rally driver, but you will have to be careful of getting knocked out of the saddle, which happens quite a lot. I tried hardcore very briefly, but I really liked this navigation aspect of it. The no quest marker thing really adds an incredible amount of immersion into the game, and you'll have to interact with the world as you would in real life. You also die very easily, so it's definitely a trade-off, but still, it's worth at least trying out for sure. And the saving system is unique too. Even on normal mode, you can't just save anytime. You will have to use a specific consumable or have to sleep in a bed you own to save. You can easily mod this out to save anytime, and modding and using console commands don't affect your ability to get achievements, so you can go wild. This might be also preferable because of the game-breaking bugs sometimes, but leaving it in adds to the very unique experience, and you'll have to think about where to save and what type of encounters to dare after not saving for a while. While writing this video, I also started a new Skyrim run because I wanted to check out the it's like medieval Skyrim comparisons, and this was one of the main differences for me. In Skyrim, nothing's stopping you from quick saving every single step, and it's comfortable, sure, but it takes away a level of planning that is a very core part of Kingdom Come. Or how you can just eat a bunch of food in combat and heal, or how you can warp around the map in an instant to basically anywhere without any consideration, because it's instant and free, or being the Archmage of Winterhold as a fighter. Playing these two side by side, it was incredible how fantasy Skyrim felt in terms of role-playing mechanics. Even more so now than when I played it around release. Back then I thought it was kind of realistic for a fantasy world, but it's completely different to KCD in terms of these mechanics. Survival mode is much closer, which is an added option in later Skyrim versions. In Kingdom Come, food works differently as it doesn't heal you and you can't eat during combat, but it decreases your hungriness, which is a stat you have to constantly pay attention to besides tiredness. It also goes bad if you leave it long enough in your inventory, and if you eat raw meat before cooking it, you will get food poisoning. It's not as hard as something like in Pathologic, where staying alive is a core part of the challenge, but it's something you will have to constantly think about. So you will have to periodically eat to not get pretty severe debuffs from being famished. You can do this by buying food or hunting for meat yourself or stealing vegetables from villagers, but the easiest is just to eat from the communal pots that are literally everywhere and free. Or if you want the authentic Eastern European experience, you can just stack up on alcohol, as alcoholic beverages also decrease your hunger, so you can just live on that, I guess. A side note, but if you enjoy the alcoholic Slavic Knight gameplay, there is a game just for you. Set in 15th century Slovakia, you have to fight the Hussites and the Ottomans and eldritch monsters summoned forth by a cult. But my favorite part is the writing. If you speak either Hungarian or Slovakian or both, there's so many little jokes and Easter eggs to find. If you're at all interested in weird historical fiction with a really cool art style as well, I really recommend this. But anyway, in Kingdom Come you will also have to wash yourself regularly too, or take a proper bath every now and again, as your clothes will stink and people will treat you differently and comment on it.
God almighty, has something happened to you? Did someone steal your fancy clothes?
On the other hand, they will treat you well if your appearance is well maintained. You will have to repair your equipment as well, which you can do either by a vendor, blacksmith for armor, cobbler for shoes, weaponsmith for weapons, etc. Or you can do it yourself, which is a skill on its own. You will have to use repair kits in general, but you can sharpen your sword too in a little grindstone minigame. There were plans to do a detailed blacksmithing minigame, which would have made sense story-wise as well, but due to budget reasons, this was cut during development. So we are left with the repair kits. And usually durability in games is there to add friction to the gameplay, and as such is pretty annoying to deal with. You're just constantly returning things to a default state, and it's just a currency dump. No improvements. But here I think they've struck a pretty good balance. With the maintenance skill, you are rewarded for taking care of your own stuff, which is a sense of accomplishment on its own and feels like you are just leveling the skill, so there's progress as well. And if you don't want to do it and go pay someone else for the work, it adds to the realistic role-playing aspect of the whole thing. And wear and tear actually visually shows on the armor and clothes as well, which decreases your charisma, so you're incentivized to pay attention that way too. I think this whole system works really well. And speaking of equipment, let's get into how this works. There are 16 equipable slots just for armor, and the reason is because instead of having just a chestplate armor slot, for example, you have layered clothing. So on your upper body you can have a shirt, a gambeson, an armor, and on top of that some upper garment that signifies your status and wealth. Same for your head, so instead of just one helmet slot, you have a coif, chainmail, and a helmet on top of those. Each of these will have stats and durability on their own, so looting someone well armored is kinda complicated because of all the clothes you have to drudge through. But on the other hand, it's a very interesting way to give you the chance to compose your set in the exact way you want. You really can live out your medieval outfit coordinating fantasies in a bunch of different ways. But you will have to manage carrying around all of that because there is a carry capacity limit, of course. Everything has a weight and your character can carry so much, so you either have a horse with a lot of saddlebags or dump everything in your stash that's next to your bed in every city usually. So in your stash you can have a collection of books or cool helmets if you want. Another thing you can do with all this loot is sell it and get incredibly rich. And if you do loot everything, this will be a challenge in itself because most vendors simply don't have enough money to buy your stuff. And if you're over the carry weight limit, you don't have running or fast travel, you can't even climb your horse, so just getting to the vendor will be pain. What I found is that selling to the millers is the best. Millers in this game function as fences for story reasons we'll get into, but this means they always buy stolen stuff and usually have a lot of money as well. And if you sell to one constantly, they will get even more rich over time as they sell the stuff you sold them, so you can sell even more. It works wonderfully. Speaking of crime, I found stealing is by far the easiest way to get money in this game. Like you can target houses of the richest people in town, like the bailiff or the scribe, and just become obscenely rich in one night. If you're sneaking, you can also incapacitate people in a non-lethal way, so rummaging through their house unbothered will be even more easy. And you can take the stuff they have on them as well while you're at it. If you try to pickpocket someone while they're awake, you'll have a minigame you need to not mess up, where you uncover their possessions and have to get out before they notice you. But if they're unconscious, you can just loot them. Every NPC has a day cycle, like going to work or going to sleep at night, so you can also spy on people for a while and figure out the best approach. Lockpicking is also a minigame where you have to rotate the lock while holding a pin in place. If you have a high enough lockpicking skill, the easier locks will be just opened automatically. There's always a red hand icon next to stolen items, and normal vendors will not buy these, so you either wait a bit as it goes away after a while, you go to another city where it's less likely they will know it's stolen, or you just sell it to a fence. You can even haggle for a better price, and in late game haggling can give you a lot of extra money. But either way, you will become incredibly rich very fast. And when you're rich, you can give the vendors tips to increase reputation with the same haggling system. You have to hide the bodies you leave behind too, because if any NPC finds one, they will shout and run for help. And if you're seen or caught in the process, or if you are random searched by a guard while carrying stolen stuff, you'll have to first try to lie your way out of the situation. This will use the dialogue check system that is all over the game: persuasion, intimidation, or charisma. You have a stat that is mostly based on your skills and gear, and the opponent has a stat, and if yours is higher, you win. Well, most of the time. And I like how these are numbers you need to beat and not percentage rolls. It's really annoying in an RPG where you fail a check you're supposed to be good at just because of RNG and you can't do anything about it. Here, you know the value you need to beat and you either have it or not. If you are wanted in an area, you're caught and you can't weasel your way out of it, you are going to jail. Which is just a timer and you have to wade through it. But this at least resets your reputation. So let's say, for example, maybe, hypothetically, you were leveling your sword skill on the innocent wayfarers and they were afraid of you. If you go to jail for any reason, they will not run from you anymore. As you can probably tell, I love stealth in this game. I usually don't do the stealth archetype in RPGs, but something in Kingdom Come just works so well. Like you can just look at someone on the street and if they seem wealthy, you follow them home because everyone has their own daily routine that ends in sleeping somewhere, and just look through their place. I funded the whole reconstruction of Pribyslavitz by doing this, but more on this later. So stealth is really good, but combat is also a big selling point of this game. They pride themselves in putting a lot of effort recreating something that feels authentically medieval while being based on historical sources. They had two things to help them. one was historical manuscripts on fighting techniques. There's a lot of really detailed teaching materials for the different styles of fighting, and a lot of very funny but also very informative illustrations accompany these, so current day historians can recreate the movements. The other one was historical reenactors who do this as kind of a sport. The Kingdom Come dev team had a few of these people brought on board to advise them in the animations and the style of combat that was needed for a game like this. They started with mounting first-person cameras on people to see if this idea even works, and it did, so they did the mocap for it. And in the mocap studio, you can see the movement in real time in third and first person, so you could really see what works and what doesn't. And that's why the real fencer's involvement was so important. It has to look good as choreography and make sense historically, but also feel good as a game.
I say how the choreography might look from a realistic historical perspective, and then the designer explains to me why that's out of the question in a game. He explains to me his own concept of how the player experiences the moves, and will see his hands in front of him, and will be doing things that I tell him are nonsensical. After several hours of very intense physical discussion, in which I grab a sword, the designer grabs a sword, and we have to resuscitate the designer, we arrive at some very good compromise between historical combat realism and something the player can really enjoy and have a powerful experience.
The player needs to feel like a sword fighter on a battlefield, and that involves a lot of planning. So you have to choose the fighting technique of the character based on personality, because a murderous style will not come across well in the hands of the good guys. But you also have to consider background, as a farmer might fight differently than someone who was educated by a master and read instructional manuscripts. These books from around the time are mostly the main source of how we know how melee combat might have looked historically. And there's a lot of these books, even Durer made one. And if you've been on this channel before, you know I tend to get lost in this stuff. But through a great victory of fortitude, I did not end up making the whole video about manuscripts.
Please clap.
Still, these few examples should give you an idea of how these experts try to recreate the fighting techniques of the time. And if you go to a museum, you can see some of the weapons or armor they used in the time period. This brings it closer so much because the illustrations in the books are so abstract, but here you have a saber that was actually used by someone. Or see the items of a Cuman soldier in real life and compare it to the Cumans in the game. And great swords and set up fighting scenes and crossbows and axes and maces, actual weapons used hundreds of years ago. If you have the chance, I really recommend going to a museum and checking these out, or even the everyday items from the time period of the game. It will bring you closer to these characters and their everyday life, and how much skill must have been needed to actually fight using these. Okay, so how does all of this look in the final game? In the early versions it was quite stiff, obviously, but I think the finished version is a really enjoyable and interesting take on the first-person RPG combat. So your character will always lock on to one person, and there will be a star shape displayed on top of them. By moving your mouse, you choose which directions to attack from, and with the mouse buttons you slash or stab. You can also block and dodge, and later you will unlock combos and master strikes, where you don't really attack anymore, you just punish openings in the opponent's defenses. And as you take damage, you will lose visibility and maximum stamina as well, so you will have to be even more careful. You can also kick your opponent during fights. Kicking was invented in 2006 for Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, but it works in the historical setting of Kingdom Come as well. And your character is pretty mobile in general, which was another goal of the team. They wanted to show the falsehood of myths about armor making you immobile, sluggish, and unable to jump. In the heat of combat, you need to move fast, and we can do so in game as well. There is archery, fist fighting, and a bunch of different types of weapons, and even horseback combat, so it gets pretty complex and strategic. And because it's pretty complex, it also fits into the role-playing of the story. You start as a nobody basically, who has to earn every single step along the journey. If in the beginning you encounter more than one enemy, especially if they are armored, you will have to either run or reload because there's no way you are beating 2+ people at once. But as you practice your skills, get more experience and gear, you will be able to clear out whole camps of enemies by yourself easily. And in the end game, you will get to a certain point where basically you are unbeatable by anyone on the map. I think this is one of the big strengths of the game. When first you encounter this system, it might be overwhelming and challenging, but over time you and alongside you, your character get experience in fighting and become a proper knight. And there are other ways of deepening this immersion of learning and improving. So for example, you gather herbs by hand and make potions of them at the alchemy table by hand as well. You will need to keep looking back at the recipe book or take pictures with your phone or something and follow its instructions precisely. On a higher skill level, you will be able to auto-complete potions you've already done, but first you have to grind them, put them in the brew, work the fire, etc. manually, following the recipe that describes the steps. At first, you'll be clueless about which flower is which when searching the field for your brew, and you will have to constantly keep looking at the recipe during alchemy to not mess everything up. But later as you, the player IRL, practice it and learn more about it, you will recognize the flowers and alchemy will be considerably faster and consistent. So for example, dandelions are one of the most common flowers in the game, and recently it was dandelion season here as well, and it was so cool seeing them IRL. And I was like, wow, just like in the video game. If you mess the recipe up and just create a random herb soup, you'll lose the used ingredients, so you will need to practice. And this learning alongside your character is so fascinating to me, and it really is the backbone of how the game grabs you into its world and the story itself. Speaking of which, we're gonna move to the story analysis section. These are the basics of the systems, which will be enough to start our journey, and I talk about everything in more detail as they come up. The next section will start at the beginning of the game, and by nature of this whole thing, the spoilers will be non-stop from this point. It will start shortly.
Jingle, jingle, jingle.
I'm serious.
Dingle, dangle, dingle, dangle.
Okay, let's go. Our story starts in Silver Skalitz, a real town that's located here on the real world map today. And the game map itself is based on the real world map. They chose a location where interesting historical events happened and then took a look at how to actually translate this into the game. Some big empty areas were cut to make the game world feel vast but not a chore to travel through. So for example, in real life Rattay and Skalitz are 10 kilometers away, but the whole of the game world is around 4 times 4 kilometers. At the time of the game in 1403, Skalitz is quite a settlement already. It has a castle, a village enclosed with a palisade, but accommodations outside of the stake wall as well, as there is a very important silver mine nearby and many of the workers live here. We get to know Henry, the son of a blacksmith, who lives the idyllic life of a young man in this town and who will be the protagonist of the game. A lot of the characters in this game are based on historical people, but Henry is fictional, so his story and all his interactions are fictional as well, even though his story takes place during real events that happened. I think he's supposed to be late teens in the game, as the first time we see him, his parents scold him for being out drinking, being lazy, getting into fights all the time, his mom makes him breakfast, etc. Definitely not a full adult yet, but we don't get to know his exact age. You can change his hairstyle later, but you can't customize his facial features. It will be the same in every playthrough, and it's based on the voice actor who plays Henry, who is much older than late teens, but we'll just have to roll with it. Also, besides looking much older, he has a very, quote, modern face. I don't exactly know how to describe it, but my first impressions of him was that he looks like a Renaissance fair actor. Like his face can definitely unlock an iPhone. But this is probably just some cultural stereotype of how medieval people should look, and it's very easy to look past this and get used to him. Nevertheless, Henry, as you've seen in the thumbnail of this video, is a huge part of what made the game a big success. And originally there was another actor cast for the role who cancelled at the last minute. In the early trailers, the protagonist was a completely different guy, but later he was changed to this mocap version of the current voice actor. It's really interesting to think how big of an impact Chance had in this and how different the game would feel without the face and acting of Tom McKay. In the conversation that follows, you'll get introduced to the dialogue system and choose some basic stats you want to start with. You choose your first skills based on descriptions of actions associated with them, so it's not as intimidating as trying to distribute points on a character sheet. And then you're tasked with helping out your dad, and immediately you're dropped into the world. And I think they do a great job of opening the whole RPG aspect up to you. First, you're in the small room. You get to look around and already interact with the world. Then you get out to the garden of your house, and already in the first few minutes you're hit with the wonderful atmosphere of the game world. It hooks you in immediately. You explore these smaller spaces, and then your father sends you to run some errands in the town itself. There you get to interact with a wider range of NPCs. One of these errands is to collect some debts from a guy named Kunesh, which is kind of a tutorial quest for the open-ended nature of the game. So you can just go up to him and try to beat him up, but you'll most likely lose because Henry's stats are not the best at this point. And again, he's like 16 and Kunesh is a grown man. So we need to find some other ways to get it from him. If you manage to get some lockpicks, you can just sneak in and steal stuff from him, but you can also meet your friends Matthias, Matthew and Fritz at the tavern. All of them will be important later, but at this stage of the story, they just serve to show how much trouble Henry gets into on a regular basis. Someone is bad-mouthing the king in a tavern argument. As we all know,
Charles IV, King of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperor, had a long and successful reign.
and the people at the tavern are arguing which successor is preferable. I will go into this shortly, as this seemingly high-level conflict will be a bit more immediate in a few minutes. So to teach the tavern customer not to talk badly about our preferred king, the four friends all decide to throw shit at his house, get into a fistfight with his son, run away when the catchballs are called, and successfully escape. An ordinary day for them, and now that you help them, they will also help you beat up Kunesh, who will be much easier now that there's four of you. Beat up, he agrees to let you take some things in exchange for his debt. With the money we get from selling these, we're able to buy the main goal of our visit to the town, some charcoal. You'll also meet Bianca, Henry's girlfriend, explore the town some more, and even practice sword fighting, as Henry seems to be interested in exploring the world and adventuring instead of his father's blacksmithing business. This is just practice swords, but it lets you know about Henry as a person and what he's interested in. Wanting to be an adventuring knight is one of the main motivations of all his actions, I felt like, and you learn this immediately. You also pick up a crossguard for the sword your father is making, which is a metal part between the blade and the hilt that someone else made. The sword is supposed to be for a noble lord, so it needs to be decorated and high quality. After we've done everything, Henry helps his father finish it, and they are very impressed by it. In earlier versions, the dad didn't have a beard, and such a small design decision fits his character so much better. Anyway, Theresa comes over, another young person from the village who will be important later.
Now stop staring at her and come and see this.
Two nobles arrive from the castle, and I played this game through 2 times, and I only noticed on the third that this guy is also here. He is a big part of the story, and I think this is supposed to be his introductory setup, but he's so insignificant in this cutscene I never noticed him. He's just kinda in the background while the others are talking, and then he speaks 2 sentences and leaves, and is not mentioned again for 20 or so quests. And here he seems like just a filler NPC, but he is Sir István, a Hungarian nobleman, and we will meet him again. He is a fictional character made up for the game, but the other nobleman, Sir Radzik Kobila, was an actual real person. He was Lord of Skalitz at the time, in service of King Wenceslas. He was a royal hetman, which is the 2nd highest military commander in the country, directly under the king. So he is a very high-ranking individual, and he would need to be, as this is one of the most important mining towns at the time. To oversee, the king would need to trust you very much. Also, he seems to have a history with Henry's father, but neither of them want to talk about it. Before we could get into that further, however, the main story kicks in and the town gets attacked. If you're a nerd, you can already see Sigismund's coat of arms, but Henry doesn't know this yet. Everyone starts fleeing into the castle, but Henry's mom is in the village, so his dad sends Henry ahead while he gets his wife to safety. Henry is not someone who can just leave them behind though. Even if he probably never saw real combat, he will go after his dad to help. or to do something at least. I don't believe he actually has a plan here, he's just fueled by a sense of duty to protect and fight. But he arrives too late, his parents are killed in front of him. This bored soldier is shown to be the commander of this army and a possible big bad guy and main antagonist. And while Henry is brave, he's not completely stupid, so at this point he tries to run back to the castle. He's late again, the gate closes, and he will have to flee on horseback to warn the nearby castle about the attack. Okay, so a few things before he does that. First, if you get imprisoned during any time of this intro zone, you will die in prison, as the attackers just burned down the town, including the jail itself, with you not having any way of escaping, and it's game over, which I thought was pretty funny. But why would anyone attack this peaceful town in such a horrible manner? So remember how Charles IV had a long and successful reign? He was the king of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperor, and over his life he had 4 wives, and from 2 of them he had 1 son each, Wenceslas and Sigismund. After he died, he wanted his kingdom divided between his sons and relatives, a mistake easily avoidable if he would have played Crusader kings. So these half-brothers were in line to inherit some of Charles's titles. One of them, Wenceslas, got the Czech crown, and as mentioned throughout the game multiple times, he did not live up to his father's standards. He was said to be a drunk and not really interested in actually governing, so lots of people were unhappy with his rule. Related to my interests, he commissioned an illuminated Bible though, it's beautiful and it's one of the earliest German translations of the Bible. The other son, Sigismund, through a marriage got the Hungarian crown, and that's why he's introduced in Kingdom Come as the Hungarian king. But as you see, he was no more Hungarian than Wenceslas, and he liked partying as well. Before reading a lot about him for this video, I only remembered him from a historical fiction book I've read years ago, where he was portrayed as a king whose main concern was getting laid. So at least in folklore, he wasn't much different from his half-brother. And he actually had a lot of problems establishing his rule in Hungary initially. The nobles were not keen on accepting him, and he had to defeat multiple rebellions against him. There are anecdotes about him being called a Czech pig by one of the rebels, and generally he was just thought of as the little brother of the Czech king. Through no small efforts, he crushed all of these uprisings, and he started giving away a lot of land to solidify his rule, which also meant money started being a problem. We are around 10 years before the game at this time, and the Ottomans started attacking Hungary from the south, which made the money problems even worse, as the funding of these battles does not come cheap. So Sigismund traveled around the western courts asking people for help. He wanted to destroy this threat once and for all, and he wanted to do this with a combined international army. French, German, English, Greek, Polish, and lots of different nationalities of knights joined, and the Pope declared this whole endeavor a crusade. They had a large number of soldiers, but also many different conflicting ideas of how the battle should be fought, which led to disagreements even during the battle. This lack of unity and a series of unfortunate strategic decisions ensured that they were utterly crushed at Nicopolis in 1396. This was 7 years before the game starts. By the way, István, the Hungarian noble, also implies he was here in this battle. Sigismund II was here personally, but barely made it out alive, and his rule was not looking good after. The next few years are hectic between the rebelling Hungarian nobility, the Ottomans, the money problems, and the problems with his half-brother. The latter he tried to solve by imprisoning Wenceslas and making him basically abdicate to Sigismund, who, to help with his money problems, imposed heavy taxes on Bohemia and also entered the country with his army. He looted cities and went after supporters of his half-brother. For example, in 1402, so 1 year before the game, Gutenberg was looted. And since Sir Radzig was loyal to Wenceslas, and just like Gutenberg, it is an important silver mining town, in 1403 Skalitz was also attacked. And this is where we are now with Henry, who is fleeing from this attack. He runs outside the walls and needs to find a horse. On our way we can save Theresa, because 3 enemy soldiers are trying to break into her house at the moment. Trying to fight them is not gonna work, but distracting them will give her enough time. We need to steal a horse and quickly ride towards Talmberg. Since we're only wearing just a shirt still, it's very easy to die here, but eventually you'll make it out and arrive safely, if not unharmed. Talmberg is a small castle with a village next to it and a quarry to the north. Talmberg belongs to Sir Divish, who was a real historical figure as well. From 1401 he was Burgrave of Prague, which is a very high political seat in the kingdom. He mostly lived there and Talmberg was managed by his wife. At the time of the game he is around 60 and his wife is much younger, around 30. After arriving, Captain Robert escorts Henry to him to give a report about the attack. After this, Henry is given a meal and a bed to rest up a bit. In the middle of the night he is woken up and it turns out Radzig managed to flee Skalitz and is marching to Rattay. Robert asks us to keep watch on the battlements, but nothing else happens in the night. As I've said, the Sigismund army is mostly after the supporters of Wenceslas, so in the morning they show up in search of Radzig. We learn that the leading bald guy is called Markwart von Aulitz. In history, he was hetman to Sigismund. He was a member of the nobility in Bohemia who supported Sigismund over Wenceslas, probably because he saw his personal prospects would be better under Sigismund. None of that came to be, however, as in real life, and this is kind of a big difference to the game, he died a year before the raid in Skalitz. So he couldn't really be here, but I guess that's why he was chosen. Henry could go after him and it will not break the continuity of events. So he's here now, 1 year after his real-life death, and he's searching for Radzig. Divish manages to convince him and the army turns around. And I want you to think about what happened so far. So the story was obviously set up in a way that this Markwart person will be the main antagonist who we will go after. At this point, one would think that Henry will be training to become a knight as to be powerful enough to defeat him. When I first played it, I was sure this was the direction we are going. And I want to emphasize this because however silly this sounds, this is the last time we will be seeing him or his army. Henry wants to go back to Skalitz to bury his parents, but he's grounded on the order of Sir Radzig and Divish. And you can talk to the guard, Captain Robert, or even Lady Stephanie about wanting to go, but none of them will straight up let you out, so Henry will need a disguise to sneak out. You can buy lockpicks from the trader and just steal a uniform from the armory that lets you sneak past the guard. And while you're here, you can rob the place blind to set you up with a bit of starting money. I love stealth in this game. So we get to Rovna and see the place is also burned, and I really like how awkward Henry is in this scene. He seems to have no idea what exactly to do or what his plan is. He's just fueled by some blinding sense of responsibility to his parents, but has no actual experience in anything. He even throws up after seeing the carnage. We get to see the destruction of Skalitz firsthand. Usually buildings, especially that of the common people, were made out of wood. So the burning arrows and pillaging destroyed a large part of the houses and the palisade. I found an archaeology magazine that had an article about an excavation of a Hussite fort that had a similar structure, and they were able to find the base and work out the layout that way. This wooden structure seemed so powerless and fragile to me at first, so the fact that any trace remained of it for hundreds of years is so interesting. Most of the army seems to be gone by now, but the change from the lively little town in the prologue is immense. We get into our first real fight with a looting bandit, and he doesn't really have any armor or fighting skills, so we win easily. Walking around the ruins, Henry has a strong sense of guilt for running away instead of fighting. Bianca was also killed, and finally Henry finds his parents. He promises never to run again and that he'll find Markwart and avenge the slaughter of Skalitz. We take a shovel from Zbigniew, who remained here to pillage corpses. A shady figure who was one of the guys we beat up after throwing manure at the house in the prologue. He runs away and we go to dig the grave, but Zbigniew comes back, this time with a group of armed bandits. He seems to have joined them in some form and they want to take Henry's sword away, the one his father made for Radzig. This is a different bald guy and we get to fight him. As you'll remember, Henry will not run away anymore. But honestly, he should. I don't get what his plan is here, other than dying with honor. Even if he kills this guy, there's 5 more and he's just a random villager at this point. Even a loading screen tip says to run away if you feel outnumbered. But Henry has not read this and he stands and fights, which I think wants to show his determination for revenge and his courage that exceeds his logical brain. So if your goal was to bury your parents, you could do it a million more safer ways. Even after being threatened, Henry could just run and hide and come back later, but we're shown this part of his personality, the one that fights for his goals, even if attaining them seems highly implausible. And the guy is obviously a better fighter, so he will one-shot Henry, 2-shot if you're lucky. And even if you're using some clever use of game mechanics or just using console commands and kill him, the same cutscene plays, so they really want you to know that at this point Henry is pathetic and he does lose very easily. But luckily Theresa shows up. She's the girl from the prologue we saved, with Captain Robard, and they drive away the bandits, and your fancy sword is lost with them. They take Henry to Rattay on a cart and it takes him a few days to recover. Turns out Captain Robard and his men were specifically sent out to search for Henry, which, as we know now how high-ranking Division Redzig is quite unusual. They take a great interest in this random blacksmith boy, but at this point maybe they just want the sword Henry kinda stole. So we are in Rattay now, one of the big main towns of the game. We are living here outside the walls near the river at the Millers. This is the Sasau River, the one that crosses another important town we will get to later, and if you look at the world map, it's winding through the whole area as the most prominent body of water. And I really love this little room and all of Henry's accommodations. Every time I saw something similar in a castle or a museum, I was always soy pointing, like I was here, I slept here. Rattay itself has 2 castles. Next to the eastern city gate, there's Birkstein Castle. Sir Hans Capon lives here, a descendant of an old and influential family. He's in line to inherit Rattay itself. At the time he's around Henry's age, but he looks much younger. He's modeled after his voice actor as well, and he's much younger than Henry's, so it kind of makes sense. His dad died, and until he becomes old enough to govern, his uncle Sir Hanush rules in his stead. Hanush lives in the other castle on the other side of the city. They both are historical figures too, and IRL there was a lot of conflict between them. Hanush didn't really give over the power until Hans was much older, so to get busy with something, Hans hunted a lot. Also taking in the fleeing Redzig into Hans's castle led to disagreements. Rattay also has 2 churches, one bigger near the city streets and one smaller in the upper castle. These churches, and most churches in-game, are decorated with wonderful frescoes. These are murals painted on wet plaster on the wall. It was an important art medium around the time and was usually done by a collaborative effort of a team of artists, as it had to be completed before the plaster dries. Around 1300, a more realistic mural style became fashionable, and in KCD you can see both older and relative to the game newer style works. These include high-tier Kickstarter backers who you can find immortalized as saints in these paintings around the world of the game. If you live in Europe, it's more than likely you can easily see one of these medieval murals in your area as well. And Rattay has the coolest main street in the game. It really captures the cramped, busy feeling of a old medieval city. I always try to build something this cool in Manor Lords, but never can quite get it. You can speed through here too with your horse, as it cannot run people over, and you can see the named NPCs going about their day in the city as well. It's great. Not much is remaining of Rattay Castle now, but there are a bunch of videos on YouTube that show some recognizable elements that are still standing. And it came up during one of the development update videos as well. They went into the caves underneath the castle too, where food was stored with a bunch of ice as a kind of big refrigerator. It's fascinating to look at old remains like this. I've been to a way smaller castle recently. Back then it housed around 30-50 soldiers. It was renovated to show people how the living quarters and main street might have looked like, and it was such an interesting feeling, like imagine sleeping here but your windows look out here where everything else is happening. Or looking out your window and seeing views like this, or being a lookout here. After coming home from this trip, I logged into Kingdom Come and just walked around in Rattay. It's hard to explain, but it really was like I time traveled to a time the museum tried to show me. In this sense, the game is truly unbeatable. But back to the story. Henry has to meet Redzig in Birkstein to update him about the sword. We walk in on a feast where the lords are talking about the situation. And if you're confused about the higher politics of the situation at this point, you're not alone.
And what on God's earth is this war even about?
Everyone, with good reason, makes fun of Henry for being so naive and foolish, but Redzig seems to like him and takes Henry into his service. Not everyone is a fan.
He's a peasant. You can't make a squire of a peasant.
So even the characters are surprised by this. The devs said that they were inspired by historical films of the last century, and I think that's the vibe they are going for. Not necessarily 100% plausible, but a tale of someone driven by chivalry and courage succeeding against all odds. So we are sent to improve our skills. We train in sword fighting and in archery. Henry gets into a squabble with Lord Capon, and the two decide to settle it with an archery contest. If you win, then he'll make some excuses, and the two fight with swords as well. If you win at this too, Capon will try to maintain composure by emphasizing his higher standing, and then just leaves. I think this whole exchange really shows how young they must be. They truly fight like teenage boys, and it sets up their social standing as wildly different. So it sets up their dynamic, but you as a player get some motivation out of this as well. You get into this mindset that you want to prove yourself, you want to be better than this pampered, arrogant noble boy. Later we join the town guard as Radzig commanded to get some real-life experience as well. We go on patrol, which is a guided tour of the city and its daily life basically. It's really interesting to see what was considered a big city at the time. There were much fewer people on Earth in general, but even a city that was considered huge like Prague only had around 40,000 inhabitants in the times of Charles IV. You can really see the difference in scale during this tour. And here you can see small signs of everyday life too, like there's a lot of animals about. Household animals were a big part of someone's wealth, and horses, sheep, chickens, pigs were all highly prized possessions of a household. You can see them in-game just grazing or living their life, it's great. At night we move to close the tavern as we need to enforce the curfew. Lord Capon is there and he still does not like Henry one bit. He doesn't want to leave, and since no other nobles are here this time and he is drunk, he wants to beat Henry up. So we get into a fight. And look at how high school this whole thing is. But anyway, it's broken up by Hanush, who arrives and scores both of them, and as punishment sends them together to hunt. If you remember, Hanush is governing in Capon's stead, so Capon hunted a lot to keep himself busy, and the punishment here is not the excursion, but the fact that they have to make amends at least to some degree and work together. And here Henry is already kind of treated at the same level as Capon. He's referred to as Radzig's ward and is reminded that hitting a nobleman is a serious crime, but ultimately the punishment is the same. So we are moving up in the world, at least in a way. We go hunting first thing in the morning, and their heads seems to have cooled off a bit, or at least they both accepted they can't fight each other, as both of them are under a noble's wing. Henry is still made to walk next to Capon riding on a horse though, but they talk about their feelings and the sunrise is beautiful. It's a very endearing sequence. They actually open up about their individual hardships too. Henry about his experience in Skalitz and Capon about the problems with him getting his inheritance. So the trip is working so far and they are getting along. Short of saying sorry, they settle their differences for now and decide to focus on the hunt. The hunting itself is a competition again. We are looking for bunnies and the one who has the most by noon wins. And this is one of my favorite and most memorable quests in the game. I've spent a lot of time in these types of European woods as a kid, and this game does such a good job of recreating that feeling. They actually chose CryEngine because the foliage looked so good in it, and they knew it was a very important part of a game like this. And during this quest, you'll see how much of a good decision that was. Walking around in the deep, dense forests of the game is one of the best parts of role-playing, because the forests are wonderful and so close to real life. For example, this is the way up to one of the castles I mentioned before through this forest area. I love this stuff. And you know the feeling where a sudden smell or a view invokes a visceral, gut-wrenching feeling of nostalgia for like 1 second and then it's gone? I felt like that a lot during this game. There's a thing called sensory archaeology, the difficult problem of the researchers trying to recreate the smell or taste of some historical descriptions. And in KCD, they did a great job, I think, at least visually and with the sounds and music. And you can really feel the careful effort that was put into the soundscape of the game in places like this. At noon, you will have to go back to camp. If you win, you'll get a little bit of money and Sir Hans will order a hunt for a real target, which is going to be a boar in our case. The boar boards though, Capon follows it on horseback and Henry is left to run after the chasing nobleman. Finding him takes some time, and you stumble upon a Cuman camp and Sir Hans tied to a tree. In the main story, this is going to be your first real fight against armored enemies. And I really think this fight is set up really well to make you believe this is a serious life or death situation. Henry trains and trains and trains, and finally you are facing real enemies out in the woods alone, and you have to defend yourself and save your companion. Even this small fight has weight because everyone involved feels human. In first-person RPGs, often literally one of the first things you can do is clear a camp of bandits alone. But here, the zero to hero journey of Henry is really well paced. Luckily, these enemies are not the best fighters, so we free the hostage easily, and get a taste of how much money is to be made by looting full armor sets of people and hauling it to a vendor. And I haven't talked about it yet, but who are the Cumans who make up most of Sigismund's attacking army in the region? I've even found some studies from the 19th century that examine their integration to Hungary, but there's a lot more modern sources as well, of course. Cumans originate from nomadic people from the Eurasian steppe who have a long and rich history, but I will focus on the years after they appeared in Hungary, which was almost 200 years before Kingdom Come, where they appear as Hungarians. In 1239, fleeing from a Tatar invasion, 40,000 Cuman people sought refuge in Hungary, and Béla IV granted them lands. A portion of Hungary is still called Greater Cumania to this day. Integration at first was difficult as they were still nomadic and people in Hungary were mostly farming. There were also the religious differences and the animosity of the nobles. A few years later, in 1241, this led to the nobles killing the Cuman chieftain, to which Cumans responded by leaving the country, pillaging and looting in the process. A genius move by the nobles, because the Tatars were attacking Hungary now and the Cuman fighters could have helped, but this way they attacked as well, and the Tatars looted the country for years. Masterful gambit source. But a few years later, Béla called the Cumans back and they settled a second time. He even married his son to a daughter of a Cuman chieftain, and their son, one of Hungary's later kings, is called Ladislaus the Cuman. Still not a smooth process, but in the next few hundred years they assimilated into Hungary and they provided military service to the country many times. One of these times was when Sigismund used them as mercenaries in his feud against his half-brother. And so here we find them in the forest next to Talmberg, capturing Sir Hans and losing to the valiant sword fighter Henry of Skalitz. We get him back to Talmberg, the lords are very thankful, and Henry is in Sir Radzig's personal service now. And not too soon, because news comes of a bandit attack at the nearby settlement of Neuhof. By their description, Henry thinks it's the same guy who took the sword at Skalitz, so he's sent there to investigate. We get our own mount now as a reward for saving Sir Hans, and we ride with Bernard and his men. The scene does not look good. Lots of people and horses are dead, the stables was set on fire, and the bandits seem to have been after carnage and not stealing. Bernard reluctantly lets Henry look around as well, and we question 3 witnesses, Jacob, Mark and Ginger. They are shaken up but confirm 2 things. The bandit we are looking for was here, and the bandits also quarreled amongst themselves. Henry will find some tracks that lead him into the direction the bandits might have fled. There's no real forensics in the modern sense, so Henry just follows the tracks and hopes for the best. And we find some of them still here, talking in a clearing. One is heavily injured and begs the other to end his suffering. If you arrive here fast enough, they also mention Ginger by name, the guy we just talked to. But otherwise, we'll just have to kill the one who remained alive and search the one that he's killed. We find a bloody hoofpick, and the people in Neuhof believe it was Ginger's, who ran off while we were in the forest. So now, after being a squire, we are also an investigator, and honestly at this point in the story I was very confused what even is happening. Who are all these people and how are they connected to the main guy? Remember him? It felt like Shenmue, where the protagonist is looking for someone specific but is doing every conceivable side quest in the universe. But this is the main quest here, so we will just have to roll with it and keep in mind that we have 2 main enemies now, the bandit leader and the bandits, and the army leader and the Cumans. Ginger, who is suspected to have aided the bandits, is friends with some charcoal burners, so Henry asks around. We learn that some other people are also looking for Ginger, and his friends will not tell us his location until he's safe from his pursuers. So we find the bandits' camp, and since Henry is not a good fighter yet, wait for them to be asleep and easily win against them unarmored. Now the charcoal burners trust us and give us Ginger's location. Turns out Ginger wasn't working with them, he just recognized one and thought he might be killed for it. He only knows it's a man with a limb from Uzhitz, and he also heard that the bandits' quarrel was about the nature of their attack. There seems to have been two bands, one wanted to steal and one wanted to murder. We report back to Captain Bernard and Radzig and we're off to Uzhitz. Uzhitz is a little bit to the north and is also a real settlement. Its most prominent building in the game, the church, exists in real life, and it's featured in one of the dev diaries as well, to explain how much effort was put into figuring out how this building might have looked around this time. It was obviously renovated and rebuilt a bunch of times since then, so it was a combined effort of the artists and historians to visualize how it was before all that. When Henry arrives, a large crowd is gathered in front of a house that's supposed to be of the limping man, Lubos. He's already butchered, no one knows what exactly happened, but he seems to have known the local priest, so that's where we go next. And so starts one of the most famous parts of the game. He knows what Lubos was up to, but was told in confession, so he can't outright tell Henry without breaking the sanctity of the confessional. You can either convince him with a dialogue check and miss the great cinematic masterpiece that is to come, or just go drink with him in the tavern that night while he thinks of a way to tell you. They open up to each other, Henry about the Skalitz raid and his journey since then, and Father Godwin about what he thinks makes a good sermon. He also talks about how he likes the teachings of Jan Hus, a controversial opinion to say the least. Jan Hus was an early figure connected to the ideas of the Reformation. He was a priest working and preaching in Prague, inspired by the writings of John Wycliffe, who advocated for the abolishment of the papacy, the monastic orders, indulgences, and the Bible to be translated to the vernacular language of the common people. Jan Hus preached in Czech and even translated Wycliffe's work to Czech and got quite the following. But for his views, he was excommunicated and named a heretic. Ultimately, in 1415, he was invited to the Council of Constance, where he went with a guarantee of safe conduct given to him by Sigismund himself. In the end, despite this promise, Hus was burned at the stake for his views. In the game world, this hasn't happened yet, but Godwin just telling you he finds these views interesting is quite something. After philosophizing about doctrine, we party with the priest and his concubine. Now we end up on the wrong side of the curfew ourselves and have to beat up the bailiff who wants to enforce it. We escape to the bell tower where we cause more problems and end the night with our companions.
Well, I have to say that was a fine evening.
The morning finds us in the presbytery, where Godwin is reminded he needs to preach a sermon. He's too messed up to do it, so Henry has to. The cover story is that he heard Jan Hus in Prague and wants to share his teachings. So we go up there in our sleeping clothes, but Henry remembers what Godwin told him about a good sermon, so the people will like the speech a lot and Godwin will give us the info we need. You know the one, we need to get to Lubos's friends, and through them to get to Rand, and through him to get to Sir Marquardt. A bit complicated, but we are back on track. Lubos and his gang were hired to steal some horses, but it turned into a massacre, and they didn't want to do that, so they fled. We get the name of the others at least, Riki, Pius, and Timmy. You can fail this whole questline with Godwin at multiple points, in which case you can get this info from the scribe or breaking into his house and reading it from a book he has. So our next goal is Riki, who is supposed to be in Ledečko, a village between Talberg and Rataj, also on the Sesau River. It's a place that exists in real life too, and they said they found records of people who actually lived there at the time, so in the game they used names of those people. We ask around, first a bathhouse worker who Riki was seeing a lot. She says Riki is a poacher and disappears into the woods a lot, and that he has some money buried behind his house from something that he said wasn't worth it. Well, Henry will make good use of this, of course. We talk to his dad, who is a tanner here. Tanners work with animal hides, and a part of preparing them for use, like as parchments for books, is soaking them in alkaline substances to get the fur out. This could be quicklime, but even urine. so the Tanners had a reputation of smelling, hence the nickname of Riki makes sense. Anyway, we talk to the innkeeper too, and finally trace the clues to Riki's hideout. We find him in a cave and he confirms that there were 2 gangs at Neuhof, and Rand's people were there to kill, not to take valuables. Riki and his gang were not willing to participate in the killings in a way Rand wanted, so they ended up being on their bad side as well. And now the ones remaining at least are very afraid for their lives. One of them is Timmy, who lives at a windmill now to the north. And they are right to do so, as Rand's people show up. 2v3 is not as bad, but Riki is not a good fighter and dies very easily. We loot the remains and we're off to see Timmy. While asking around at the windmill, some of the bandits appear. You have the chance to betray Timmy here and infiltrate the bandits by helping them. Or you could ask for money up front for your help and then attack them, and then you realize you're not a fighter build and then just run away. So now we have 200 Groschen extra and Timmy's hiding location. Great success. Timmy is hiding at a farm, and after all this running around, he finally gives you the location of the bandit camp. We report back to Sir Radzig, who set up a camp outside of the Merhoyat stables. He's afraid of these bandits attacking other locations and wants to get rid of them as soon as possible. So he's very happy to learn about the success of Henry's investigation and sends him to do some reconnaissance and, if possible, sabotage as well. Henry really is an all-rounder here, and even though Radzig sends us to the most insane missions, he seems to be very fond of Henry.
But don't take any unnecessary risks. I don't want to lose you.
We follow the directions and find the camp in an abandoned town in the forest. There seems to be bandits and humans mixed here, so finally the 2 storylines converge and we get that all these attacks and incursions might have the same cause behind them. If you join the bandits at the windmill, they will accept you and you can walk around freely, or if you manage to get a full human armor set, you can disguise yourself as well. Otherwise, you'll have to sneak around. If you get too close to the sentries, they will question you and Henry will make up some Hungarian, which is really funny. This only works a few times, and if you get hit with a bug, you can end up stuck in a conversation. After scouting thoroughly and doing some sabotage, we go back to Sir Radzig. He doesn't like the idea of the humans and the bandits working together and the fact that they seem to be preparing for a coordinated attack, so he wants to crush them before they can make the first move. He sends us to ask Sir Divish for reinforcements and he agrees without any persuasion. If you remember, Radzig is the royal hetman, so he outranks Divish militarily and can make decisions like this. After preparations, rest and making a bunch of potions, we can march on the bandit camp. By the way, if you decide to brew your potions yourself with alchemy, these animations were mocapped as well, using weird props and funny DIY solutions. But all the brews you end up with are just herbs, nothing magical, like the name potion would imply. But still, in game terms, you have the option to buff your stats before the fight, or have some healing elixir if you need it. So it's advised to prepare before big fights like this. And then the first big fight of the game starts, a proper battle between 2 armies. I really like these sections because in fantasy you're always shown huge 1,000 people battles, but here you really see how much power even like 30 well-armored fighters can wield. This is another upside of the rural setting. The scale of the conflict is much more easy to comprehend. Marching along them with Henry under the local lord really highlights how much he moved up in society in the short time that has passed since Skalitz. We're a proper soldier now and we are going into an actual battle. In game terms, unfortunately, these are not very exciting. Even if you're just walking after the army like a tourist, they will win eventually, which means if you're doing a pacifist run where you don't kill anyone, that's exactly what you need to do. Also, if you try to join in the fight more often than not, the targeting system will just go crazy and you will have no idea what the hell is even happening. My strategy was usually to just hit enemies a few times here and there to level up stats, but otherwise I was just looting. Because this run I was a thieving rogue type of Henry, and you can get a lot of money and many great pieces of gear if you forage the battlefield here. The bandits' last line of defense is in the church, where Henry will run after Rand and will have a face-off 1v1 fight. A forced boss fight like this is not my favorite thing if you have not much health left after the battle downstairs, or if you're doing a no-kill run, or in my case where my Henry is more of a stat guy and not a fighter at all, you can have a lot of problems in a boss fight where the only option is to actually defeat them in combat. Luckily, Rant is not wearing a helmet, so shooting him in the head with a bow a few times works and he will fall over. The table has turned and now it's Henry who two-shots him. However you actually win in game, canonically in the cutscene Henry defeats him in a sword fight. So the story is that he improved immensely since their first meeting, and you really get a feel that he is up there in skill now with the other soldiers. In temper he is still a child though. Redzig and Bernard appear and report that they found a huge stash of coins in the camp, which means someone was paying these people, someone highly placed and wealthy. They all agree to rest a bit and talk about what to do after. The player doesn't have to wonder for a long time though. The next cutscene, Sir István, the Hungarian nobleman, is looking at the battlefield and initiates the quote next part of our plan, whatever that means. I'm not sure a lot of people get this here. He had such a minor role in the beginning and you don't see his face here. I still think he's not foreshadowed enough, even with this inclusion here. At the meeting, it turns out that this next part means a few other attacks, including one on the village of Merhuyed. That's the place Redzig was defending before we decided to empty the camp and attack the overgrown village in the forest. But the villagers held them off at Merhuyed and even got one captive alive. Master Fafar appears with the chest of coins we found, and it turns out all of them are fake. Counterfeiting is a serious crime, punished by losing your title and lands or even burning at the stake. In real life, counterfeiters worked in caves mostly to stay hidden, but sometimes it was better to try at the minting workshop hidden in plain sight. It was risky business, but in mining cities it was more common as it's easier to get the materials, and this region is rich in silver, so it makes sense they are trying their luck here. So now Henry has even more investigating to do, interrogate the captive and find out where the fake money is coming from. When we get there, it turns out Merhuyed has more problems than a bandit attack. A plague has been ravaging the village and killing livestock and people alike. Asking around, we'll find a lot of sick people, and the bailiff will not let Henry see the captive until the plague is gone. And the captive also has the sickness, so we need to find a cure to question him. This reminds me of something, some memory of a plague-ridden small town. We'll have to question the afflicted about the symptoms before we can go for help. Matthias is here, one of Henry's friends from the prologue, and here it's very visible how much Henry moved up the social ladder. He is an armored veteran at this point, while his friend from Skalitz is a stable boy in this village. There is a side quest here too, where one of the dying asks you to deliver his will to Father Fabian in Sassau. And we need to go there as well, because we ask around the village and have to get to Sassau Monastery to ask Johanka and Nicodemus for help. They will question Henry about the details and we'll have to peruse some tomes to find the right diagnosis. And I mean actually read the book, if your Henry learned how to read. It all points to being poisoning from water, which is another big sign that these bandits are after chaos in the region and not looting or goods. Nicodemus hands you the recipe for the antidote and you'll have to prepare it yourself. After all three of you go back to Merhuyed to administer the cure, if you don't mess up the diagnosis or the potion, the people will survive and the interrogation can move forward. We learn that the man behind bankrolling Rant and the minting of the coin is a foreigner and a nobleman for sure. The captive doesn't know where the forgeries were made, but he says they were delivered by a merchant named Manhart, and he's supposed to be meeting this person right now. If he dies of the plague, you can get this information from a letter on his body, but alive, you can let the villagers take revenge on him or take him to jail yourself. After all this, another report to Redzig is due. He sends Henry after the merchant with the fake coins. But first, we have a face-to-face talk about everything that happened so far. He is very proud of Henry for achieving so much and being instrumental in all of these operations against the bandits. I think it's good that they acknowledge it here that Henry really is a one-in-a-million talent in everything he does. In the game world, he moves up very fast, and even though in the beginning there was some dissent about how he's just a peasant boy, especially after the duel with Rant, no one can really question him or his skills. It is very video gamey that he's so good at everything, but I think it works. Scenes like this bring his humanity closer. He has strong morals he wants to uphold and questions why the world is not a more fair place. Why does God allow such suffering to happen? It really is a coming-of-age story, and we are going through it with him, even if the individual missions he succeeds in are a bit improbable and closer to fantasy. Radzig sends Henry after the trail of counterfeiters with a good luck sun, which is good foreshadowing and a good cliffhanger to take a break from the main quest. This is around the halfway point, and I want to explore the side stuff before we jump into the second half. This is roughly what I did with this playthrough as well, so my Henry was incredibly over-leveled for those main quests in the second half, but more on that when we get there. So far, I think I already realized an answer to my question in the intro of this video, about what my problem was with this story on release. It's structured in a way that is basically, Henry, you need to do this. To do this, you need to do that. Oh wait, there's something happening with that, so you need to do a third thing. And by the end, you don't even know what's going on. You're just going with the flow and hoping it will connect somewhere. I feel like they had a lot of ideas they wanted to put in the main quest line. A lot of aspects of medieval life they wanted to show, and they ended up with a structure that's not as focused as it could have been. Just think about what we were doing in Merhuyed. We were burying a widow's husband to get answers about the symptoms of a disease, to get a cure for said disease, because we needed to cure a messenger, to question him about the bandits, which we needed to do to get to the counterfeiters, who we need to get to the foreign nobles, who we need because we are after the leader of the foreign army. At this point, we don't even know who this noble is or how he will be connected to the big main bad guy from Skalitz. I think a bit of tightening this up would have really gone a long way. Another solution I could see is just throwing out the main quest that says get revenge on Markwort. Because we are not doing that at all. I think this nested structure wouldn't bother me as much if Henry's main motivation was to serve Radzig, to improve as a knight, and to push back the Cuman invasion, not to personally take revenge on the leader. Because Henry is doing everything but the last one. Things are happening in the region, and he's using every opportunity to protect people from danger and be a better knight for Sir Radzig. At this point, it's hard to imagine how he would achieve the revenge anyway, at least in the reasonable future, especially since I said this is around the halfway point. Well, we will see, but first, more training in the side activities. So let's start with Rattay, as it's kind of the main city of the region in a lot of sense, and it has a lot to do. I want to start with the Sir Capon quest because it's a nice tie-in to the main story, and the development of their friendship is one of the most interesting character arcs for me. So we left Lord Capon after we saved him from captivity, and he was recovering from his wounds. He hasn't really done much else since then, and he is very much bored. He invites Henry to a multiple day-long bathhouse party session. You might have gone to a bathhouse yourself at this point in the playthrough. It's a place to get your gear and yourself washed. And if you want, you can get some help in this from the girls who work there. The stuff they help you with is only heavily implied, but you even get a buff after spending time with a girl in the baths. So anyway, we could guess what Lord Capon wants to do, and Henry is also a young boy, so he doesn't have much against this either, and we agree to meet him that night. He goes immediately though, and if you go there earlier, he will be busy already. But we go back after dark and start the party, which is sitting in a bathtub and drinking heavily. They have like 2 idle animations during this. It's really funny how they keep washing their armpits and splashing like a toddler during the conversation. After a while, Capon wants some finer wine and sends us to raid the winery at the Rathaus. Finally, our stealth build comes in handy. We get the wine in the pouring rain in the middle of the night, and the party can continue with more heavy drinking. After a while, Lord Capon wants to give flowers to the bathmaid, so we are sent on another fetch quest to the upper castle garden to take some roses. While walking back, there's commotion in our room because the boyfriend of our bathmaid is here. So we beat him up naturally, and finally no other obstructions remain to get blackout drunk and wake up outside. This is a side quest which is easily missable, but it really solidifies their individual characters, the development of their friendship and their relationship dynamic. Lord Capon is obnoxious and overconfident. He knows he cannot be touched by anyone and uses his power for his own entertainment. but I feel like Henry enjoys getting these assignments and getting into trouble and being so close to power. This way he himself gets a feeling of being above the law. Like if you meet the guard at the cellar, you can just tell him you're here on behalf of Lord Capon and he will just let you go. But even Lord Capon has at least one person who he has to listen to, and the follow-up quest is about that. His uncle, Sir Hanush, summons both Henry and Capon, so you know we're in trouble. Capon gives us some fancy clothes to dress for the occasion, so Henry looks like a dork, but also this is the first time when he's mingling with nobility and also looks the part, an important step in his climbing up the social ladder. Pirkstein is decorated according to the inhabitant's status as well, and now that we are not following the main quest, we have some time to look around and really see how rich they are. All the walls are painted and decorated in a way you don't see in a commoner's house. Here's a real example of a recreation of a noble's room, or here's a bishop's room. And in this one you can also see how drapes were used as insulation. Or here's a bishop's palace and you can still see the painted walls. I really recommend looking up sometimes in the game. You can see beautiful room decor in Rattay, in Talmberg, or any other place where a more wealthy individual lives. It's great. Just like during the main quest, Hanush is very concerned by the optics of Capon's actions. He thinks a nobleman should act in a way that commands respect and admiration from their subjects, and drunkenly beating up people in a bathhouse is not exactly like that. So again, just like during the main quest, he sends us on a mission as a form of punishment. One of Captain Bernard's distant relatives turned up with a small retinue and has been terrorizing the local subjects, so we are sent to deal with it. Honestly, the family implications of this are way over my head and not very interesting to me, but you can talk to Bernard during this quest to get a very detailed rundown of his family history. I'm glad he gets his own deeper story and more character time that makes him more than just a sword fighting trainer, even if I can't comprehend the intricacies of this family conflict. First, we need to find the camp's location, so Henry goes investigator mode again and starts questioning the local farmers that were attacked by the troublemakers. The woman here leads Henry to the camp eventually, and he has to report back to Captain Bernard. You have a bunch of ways to deal with them, like fighting the whole camp alone or with Bernard, but you can also try convincing the robbers to just pack up and leave, and if Henry is a skilled diplomat, they'll even leave the loot they got so far behind. My Henry was still not a fighter at this point, so this is the route I took. Neither Bernard nor Hanush will be 100% satisfied with this, as we just passed them on to rob the neighboring territories, but at least they are relieved to be done with this whole thing. So in the end, Capon didn't really do much to help, but he was there with the company, even if Henry did most of the work. Which will be the case in the next questline involving Capon. And this one is his own DLC story, The Amorous Adventures of Bold Sir Hans Capon. And if you miss the objectives nested in objectives nested in objectives type of quest design, boy do I have some good news for you. The whole thing starts by asking Capon if you can help with anything. He's in love with the butcher's daughter and wants to court her. The latest fashion in France is to court in secret, so Henry will do the matchmaking duties. First, Capon wants to give her a necklace as a gift, however, the one he wants to give, he lost at Dice in Ledechko. The guy who took it also lost it to a nobleman at Dice, and after following the nobleman's trail, we only find the corpse. This guy, Alphonse, was killed by a bandit, and we need to infiltrate their camp to find the killer and search for the necklace. We get some directions from his friend and need to find the camp deep in the woods. The bandits here are not hostile at least, and you have a lot of different ways of achieving your goal here. You can fight everyone and take the necklace, or stealth of course, but the most interesting method is, and the intended one probably as the quest name is Game of Throws, is to win at the dice tournament these bandits are having. Which is harder than it might seem, as some of them have loaded dice. And if you don't have your own and just want to do it with the basic default set of dice, it's basically impossible. So what you could do is steal this guy's dice while he's asleep, and now you have the powerful loaded dice, and you will win easily. And this is Alphonse's set of dice, so you know that he was probably the killer as well. You get the key to the prize chest, and finally it contains the necklace we need for Lord Capon, and a bunch of other valuables as well. Now you can go back and report the killer's name to the friends of the nobleman to get a bit more money, but after that we're off to see Capon. But life is not as easy, and turns out we need to deliver it too. in secret to keep in line with the fashionable style of secret courting or whatever he said. The butcher follows you closely and behaves like an Oblivion NPC, so it's pretty funny. But otherwise, this step is not anything special. After we report back, he sends us to get a love potion, which will open up another different quest. I think a lot of people don't like this DLC because this story structure just doesn't make sense. This is supposed to be about the amorous adventures of Hans Capon, and you think that it fleshes out his and Henry's relationship more as well, but you almost never see him. When you hear the name, do you think of getting into a bandit camp to play dice, or do you think of courting ladies with Lord Capon? He's literally just a quest giver to a set of completely different objectives that are good in themselves, but not at all related to Lord Capon. I guess it reinforces how impulsive and demanding he is, but we already knew this. I think a much better way to do this would have been to have him come with you on some adventures, and we could have seen the banter and relationship form between the two. And the quests themselves should have been more focused as well, so I think the bandit camp and dice tournament is really interesting on its own, but make it a separate side quest. Why tie it to Capon, who never even shows up here? And the next part, the Charlatan questline, is one of my favorite quests in the game, but why is it in this DLC? It has nothing to do with Capon. I think a lot of people would like it more if it wouldn't be made just a chore to do to progress the Capon questline. This should have been its own thing too. And the Capon adventures should have been with Capon himself, not just him sending us on some fetch quests. Okay, anyway, so the potion quest with the Charlatan. We find him in Ledechko and he knows of the potion. You can just buy it from him and skip this quest, I guess, but that makes it even more of just a fetch quest. The other option is that he will give it to Henry for free in exchange for a small favor, so we do that. He's down on his luck, has no money, and sleeps on straws. All of this is because the locals don't believe in his superstitions and his charms, so we need to help him convince them. His business idea is to make the village think there's a ghost about, and they need charms against this ghost. So we dig up a grave, empty it of remains, and go to the local gossip to hint at the empty grave we found. Maybe the dead rose from it to get revenge on the living. The guy was buried outside the village in unconsecrated ground, so we know he was some kind of sinner, and we gather some details about him from the gossip. Based on these, the Charlatan comes up with things his ghost might want to do to get revenge. Steal eggs, spoil food, turn water into blood, steal rosaries. So you need to do these stealthily. There's a bunch of other secret ways to freak out the locals. You can ask some travelers to help haunt the villagers. You can poison the local water supply. There will be one guy who thinks this is all a hoax, so we need to scare him and his friends as well. One is afraid of fire, so we shoot an oil lamp with a bow to scare him. The other is afraid of wild animals, so Henry learns how to imitate a scary howl from a dog. The last one, the Charlatan, will scare off with his costume. After doing all this, the Charlatan's business is booming and he will give you the recipe. And you see what I mean, right? This is such an interesting quest, exploring the superstitions of villagers in medieval times, showing how one or two immoral individuals could play with the feelings of an entire village, seeing how much Henry enjoys getting up to no good and how creative he can get to achieve his goals even if they are unethical. This would have been so interesting as just a side quest in the Charlatan storyline, where Henry does it because he wants to. But the whole setup is that we need a potion for Sir Hans, so we have this random guy lie to a whole village, which is nonsense and makes this whole quest feel like a ridiculous sidetracked time waster instead of an interesting excursion into medieval superstitions. At least in the Steam reviews, lots of people seem to hate this quest, but I think its only problem is that it's tied to something completely different, which is Capon's latest infatuation. We go back to him and it's finally time for the big rendezvous. He gives us a book of poetry to memorize and we will need to prompt him what to say during the courting. When we go back to him, he's got a rash from the potion we worked so hard for. We need to give him a healing potion so he has better chances with his crush, and off we go. And finally we go together. There's banter and backstory on the way, and the amorous adventures are happening on screen with Lord Capon. This is what the whole DLC should have been. You prompt him from the shadows, but he messes up the quotes anyway. The butcher and some other people will come after you, Hans will run to the girls' room, and it's up to Henry to cover for them while they... If you buy enough time for them, Capon will be very happy in the morning and tell you he's never planning to see her again. And that's it. I really like parts of this DLC, but I don't think it works as a whole. It's very disjointed and would have worked way better if it actually included Sir Hans more. As it is, it's a funny few hours, but it doesn't really add anything to either characters that we already didn't know. There are side quests in Rattay though, where Henry himself gets into some amorous adventures. He can invite Theresa out for a walk. They haven't really talked since fleeing from Skalitz, and they have a lot of shared trauma to talk about. We make some small talk, and even Theresa mentions Jan Hus, so they show that his teachings really permeated the thoughts of the common people everywhere. She suggests a race along the river, and we make it an actual competition and win easily. I'm sure that is a good way to flirt, and she appreciated that a lot. We have a nice picnic, and it's such a peaceful, carefree moment among all the hostilities. They become a bit closer and flirt as friends, but at this point it's still just something beginning to form. A little time passes and Henry can take Theresa out to a tavern in Rattay. They dance and have a good time, but a drunk old man assaults Theresa. He wants to fight, and even though armor doesn't matter in fistfights in the game, my Henry was so powerful at this point he has no chance. Theresa helps clean the wounds, and after walking her home, they finally... We are moving fast, and the last part of this quest starts with playing Blind Man's Bluff together. Theresa wants to play it, but because it's a children's game, she's embarrassed and wants to play in the Born. So she displays levels of riz here rarely observed. And you know damn well where this ends. This is a really cute romance subplot, I thought. It makes sense for them to end up together since they are very young, around the same age, and have a shared history. They also had some attraction going on in the prologue, but at the time Henry had a girlfriend already. I think it's also good that it's not portrayed as this big nightly courting and romance. It's much more grounded, and both of them are fully aware of what this is. This fling between them never really plays a big part in Henry's motivation or choices in the main story, and Theresa seems to think of this as just a casual thing as well, and not something too serious. Another thing you can do here is get into the Woman's Lot DLC quest. This is one that adds a questline for Johanka in the Sasa monastery, which we will do later, and one for Theresa that starts here. It also adds a dog companion, by the way, and the whole system for having a dog, giving him food and commands. I never really interacted with this honestly, because, and this might be the hottest take in this video, I don't like when you have to fight dogs or see dogs getting hurt. This DLC adds a lot of dogs to camps of enemies, which other than making stealth a bit harder, makes you fight them as well. I don't like this at all. I get the realism or whatever, and if you're a pretentious writing enjoyer, you might think depicting harm to animals is somehow profound and meaningful. But I'm not like that, so I just left the dog companion at the Rattay mill with Theresa, and he seems perfectly happy there. And to be honest, the Theresa questline for this DLC is not the best either. You can start it by going up to her, asking about how she made it out of Skalitz, at which point you lose control of Henry for a while and start controlling Theresa in the past before the attack. And right off the bat, taking away the character you built was a bad choice, I think. This never happens anywhere else in the game. The first-person view is only broken in cutscenes where you see Henry from the outside, but you're always him. And you build him in a way that's comfortable for you, a stealth guy, a fighter, etc. And you get used to that, but now in RPG terms, you just get a level 1 character that feels unfamiliar. And because it never happens elsewhere, it's such a weird and alien experience, like logging into a friend's MMO account and not knowing how to play the character. Theresa has the same skills as Henry, but obviously she is mostly a beginner in mostly all of them, as she's a miller's daughter in the village and never had much opportunity to fight, for example. I think on a meta level with the theme of the DLC, this wants to show you how even Theresa would have the chance to improve in the same way as Henry. She has the same abilities if she was given the chance. But because she was born a girl, she's just confined to helping out at meals throughout the game. And the DLC starts with tasks to drive this point home. You have to feed the animals, feed the vegetables, and later she has to go to get nails from the blacksmith, and on your way you meet a lot of people who you only saw in passing in the Henry prologue. And that's one thing this DLC section does really well. It humanizes people that were on the margins in the original prologue. It makes the horror of the attack even more impactful. You can see Henry as well practicing sword fighting, and he invites Theresa for a duel. And she has quite the talent for it, if not the experience. She can injure Henry and they have an intimate moment. This is the backstory of Henry's injury from the beginning of the game, which is a cool little detail. And here is where you can see that there was already some attraction between them before they fled. But the nails are not done yet, so we have some time to do side quests. Bianca wants to pick flowers so she can brew some alcohol for Henry. She doesn't want to go alone as there's talk of a wolf prowling around in the forest. So we need to get a bow, which we do by promising to dance with a gentleman in exchange for lending us his bow. Tinker, Theresa's dog, also comes with us, and while picking the flowers, a wolf does attack and we have to take him down. And that's the quest. But I think it still does a great job of giving Bianca a little bit more personality than in the original prologue. Even if all her interactions here involve talking about Henry, so not the most complex character, but still we learned a little bit more about her. And this sets up that Theresa is not afraid of a fight in a real situation either. Another side quest that's similar is for Johanka. It's similar because it's another girl who only talks about her love interest. But I guess it's supposed to depict young people in a village who don't have much else going on. She is too afraid to tell Matthias she wants to go to the dance with him, so she wants us to be a matchmaker. So the plan is, Theresa steals his lucky dice and gives it to Johanka. While Matthias is searching for it, Johanka pretends to have found it and it starts the conversation between them. Okay, so we get the lockpicks, steal the die and give it to Johanka, and that's the quest. I think this just sets up Theresa having stealth skills, which will come up later, but also for Johanka, it gives her a little bit of a different dimension. She is shown to be very focused and reliable in the main game, but here, where she doesn't have so many responsibilities yet, she can just be a teenage girl with problems that match her age. She doesn't have to have the Marhuiat plague or the wounded at the infirmary, not yet at least. When we're done with all these and head home, we see Theresa's dad being in trouble. The guards are searching for someone who is stealing silver from the mines. If you remember, millers are like the Thieves Guild in this game, so obviously their suspicion is not unfounded. The family has a pack of stolen silver hidden in one of the flooded mine shafts. They smuggle silver out of the mines and sell it. Stealing from the king is not the lightest crime, so Theresa has to go and get it now to get rid of the evidence, leading the guards back to them. On your way to the mines, you can meet the charlatan, by the way, who is peddling stuff here. It's a funny cameo. Otherwise, the mine stealth mission, it's one of the worst parts of the whole game for me. It's very linear, and Theresa is a set character, so there's not much creativity in how you solve this. You just have to sneak around for ages and then back out. If you're lucky, you can bug out the guard AI and just run around them in certain parts, but still, this whole section is just a horrible experience. But Theresa ends up finding the silver and bringing it back to her dad. And as thanks, he informs her that he wants to marry Theresa to Master Fayfar, who is much older, but his father is only thinking about his wealth and connections. She is not happy, of course, but her dad underlines a few times that it's not her decision. That night there's a party and Theresa sees her friends who she set up enjoying their partner's company, but when she sees the old man standing about, the one she's supposed to marry, she decides not to go and runs the other direction. This is her only way of expressing her dissatisfaction, and of course she gets a scolding from her father. Now he's surprisingly mild about it, but still he forces Theresa to go and meet Fayfar that night. We go get the nails from the blacksmith, and this is exactly the cutscene we saw in the prologue, but from another point of view. Henry's dialogue just replays the choices you made when you controlled him, which is a nice touch, I thought. After Theresa goes back home, we already know what's about to happen. The Cumans attack, Henry saves Theresa as we did with him, and she barricades herself into the house. The best strategy I found is to make a stand upstairs and shoot them with arrows while they try to climb up, as Theresa is horrible at direct combat and these are armed soldiers. but she shows tremendous courage and composes herself and overcomes all of them. After a million arrows, she has to look around and see the damages, and I think these are supposed to be stealth missions, but they are very linear again. I was so done with trying stealth with her, I just ran through everything and it worked. Even if you try to fight them or get some loot, you know it will not matter in the real game, so why bother? She will find some survivors in one of the mine shafts. One of Theresa's brothers is here and he's very hurt. When the others try to flee at night, Theresa gets into an argument with them about him. She doesn't want to leave him here and they don't want to be slowed down by someone who can barely walk. So she will stay and they agree to send help when they arrive at Thornburg. So now as Theresa, we need to find stuff to help her brother. This means another bit of sneaking around under the night sky, but by the morning, despite her best efforts, Sammy is dead. I really like this jump cut here to show how tired she is, and she probably just slept instantly as soon as sitting down. She goes to find other survivors, but it's a side quest, and honestly at this point I just wanted this to end, so I didn't do it. So we go back to Skalitz itself. One of Rand's men kills Tinker the dog. Again, this reminds me of someone. And Theresa, losing all hope, just walks out into the open to confront the whole gang for beating up Henry. And honestly, this is the part I don't get, and I think it actively makes the original version worse. So in the original prologue, it seems like she is with the riders. Maybe she caught them somehow or helped them find Henry. But here in the DLC, she's just suicidal. I don't get what her plan was, and she just lucked into having the riders arrive at the exact moment. Maybe she saw them coming before walking out, but still, I don't get it. And then the DLC is over. I think my main problem with this questline is you lose control of your character and you have to play as someone else until the quest is complete. You cannot go back to Henry. If you asked her by accident, you're trapped. Good luck. Maybe it's not as bad when you do this quest early in your playthrough and Henry and Theresa are similar in power, but doing it late game feels terrible. I think something like an adventure together with her would have worked better. So for example, she needs to find something she left behind, or maybe bury her brother she left behind near the mines. So she asks Henry to escort her. We go back together, she talks a lot about her experiences, and Henry talks to her about the role of women in society, so we get to know more about both of these topics. Then somehow they get separated and Henry gets kidnapped like Lord Capon did in that one quest. But now you're the one tied up and you see Theresa rescue you by sneaking up on your captors and killing them. So you still lose control of Henry kind of, and she's still the agent of our success. But you're not yanked out of Henry like you were playing Driver 3. And so you see this in first person, and Henry could comment on how he's never seen this side of her, and she'd say something like, "There's a lot you don't know," or something like this. The point is you're still your original character throughout the whole thing. I get the more linear and less player powered design was supposed to show the desperation of her situation, but for me it just ended up being not fun to play at all. I think the base premise of this time travel segment doesn't work because you can only tell one story, her escaping stealthily from an overwhelming force, because you already know the outcome. But if we do it in the present time, there's a lot more room for different stories that would still convey the same message and be fun to play. Another problem I have is the scope of the whole story. They had the chance to show some interesting aspects of women's lives in the time period, like the name would suggest, but all the girls talk about is boys. All the side quests, everyone's motivation is centered around their relationship. And there are so many stories about women in the Middle Ages that are infinitely more interesting than all of their interests and motivations being related to a boyfriend. If you make a DLC that is supposed to show a woman's lot, I think there's a lot more complexity to show than just wanting to be with a boy and not wanting to be with a boy. As it is, this questline is very limited, and even though there are really cool parts like getting to know more about the Skalitz folk or beating up Henry in a sword fight, overall I think this part of the DLC just feels not well thought out. And after writing all of this, I found that this was a Kickstarter stretch goal which kind of explains why it feels so different in its design to the other parts of the game. And honestly, if the goal was to just have a quest where you play as a girl, I kinda get why it was added. I was searching for a narrative reason it was done this way, but it was done this way to fill the promise of the Kickstarter page. It is what it is. There's another quest line from this DLC we will get to later, but now let's just move to a different DLC that starts here in Rattay. The Band of Bastards starts with talking to Sir Radzig. He hired a mercenary band to keep the roads safe, but they are not the most reputable soldiers, so he needs Henry to join them and keep them in line. So we go to their camp and their leader, Sir Kuno, wants to test Henry if he's got any combat skills or not, so he's not just a hindrance while on patrol. We need to defeat one of them in a duel, and if you don't have any combat skills leveled up, he will mess you up for sure. No problem though, we can go train and retry anytime, they will just wait. So we go beat up Captain Bernard a few times and then the duel will be easy. What I found is that Master Strikes are crazy overpowered in 1v1, so just learning them is a big help. But anyway, we go with them on patrol now, and I think it's immediately obvious why this DLC is way better received than all the others. Sure, there's a brotherly camaraderie and riding with the boys, but it's also a coherent, straightforward story. We're told why these characters are here, we meet them, they all have unique personalities, and then we go on adventures with them that make sense for their setup. They don't send Henry to a random dice tournament in the forest or to exchange eggs to charcoal. It's just moving forward in a narrative, following steps that make sense. We find a burnt-out farm that was attacked recently. Amidst the massacre, we find the crest of House Zul and a letter addressed to Sir Radzig. Hagen Zul is an impoverished noble who thinks Radzig is the reason he lost his standing and wants revenge for past deeds. Hagen wants to challenge Radzig to a duel, but he spends so much time as royal hetman he knows he's out of shape to fight an active soldier. So he puts it on Henry and Kuno's mercenary band to deal with this threat. Later we go on a second patrol to the forest of Uzhitz. We find a windmill under attack, the bandits started drinking their alcohol and are holding the local girls hostage for entertainment. Kuno wants to wait for them to be proper drunk before attacking. You can convince him to attack immediately and save the girls before harm comes to them. But our guys suck horribly at fighting, and I couldn't win this fight in a way that Kuno and our team survived. So we just wait for them to get drunk and defeat them easily at early sunrise. We can find some hammered bandits sleeping around and can kill them for free loot. You can also fist fight and play dice with the boys, but otherwise this part of the quest is done. Next patrol takes us towards Sessau, where some unfamiliar horsemen were spotted. Jakey rides ahead to scout and the band follows after, singing. Arrows start flying down from the hills and we have to defend ourselves from a lot of attackers. We regroup deeper in the forest and decide to split up and flee. Seems like Jakey was working against Kuno and his soldiers all along and betrayed them so the enemy can set up an ambush. And by the way, these NPCs will actually walk back to camp, and for me, Stefan walked through a bandit camp and got unconscious because he cannot die. So I had to go search for him, kill the bandits around, and then wait a bit so he can walk back, and then we could continue the questline. I love how this game works. So after everyone's back, Kuno sends us to find Jakey and find out what he knows about Hagen. He will be bound to a tree in the forest next to an inn where he was drinking and got scammed by some girl. Hagen is planning to raid Samopesh and Jakey thinks that's where we can find him. After he tells you you can just leave him here or take him personally to jail, but whatever happens to him, we're ready for the final quest of the DLC. But before that, during this questline, there's also a side quest, the Ring of Bacchus. Kuno gave the others the ring and promised to pay everything at the tavern to whoever has it. So naturally, they've been stealing it from each other and want your help getting it. So you have to pickpocket it a bunch of times, or find it hidden on a tree, or even have it stolen from you while you sleep. But at the end, Kuno will be frustrated at how this game became actually bad for morale and asks us to give the ring to him, which will mark the end of this whole thing. It's a really great side quest that adds a lot of character to the band and gets you into the group cohesion and dynamics, so you will feel included and part of them. As soon as we get the information from Jakey, we ride to Samopesh and the two bands of soldiers face off on the fields. Hagen is a noble, so he will try to pay off Kuno and his mercenaries to stand down, as his issue is with Radzig and not them. If you convince Kuno that honor is more important than money, the two groups will fight. But again, they are terrible at it and always die in like 5 seconds, so you're left to solo 10 guys, which is a horrible experience, but you have other options. You can let him go with the money and challenge Hagen to a duel yourself. This way it's only a 1v1 fight, and at this point, for my character, I don't think anyone could beat him 1v1. I had the Headcracker feat as well, which gives you a chance to kill the opponent on a headshot, so Hagen just falls in 1 hit. Hagen will not die, and if you kill him after this, all of his soldiers will aggro. But he leaves and promises to leave the locals alone. I've been reading a classical historical fiction book of Hungary recently, and there, after a big duel, the two groups go and drink together, which to me showed how honor worked at the time, and that these people on the two sides don't necessarily always hate each other personally. Something like this would have been cool here, a little epilogue. But we just walk off, and so ends the DLC. I still think this is one of the best because it works on so many levels. It solidifies Henry as one of Sir Radzig's most capable, reliable and powerful swordsmen, and it gives him the military experience that he needs in the story. So it deepens the narrative of him learning the ropes of knighthood step by step and makes him closer to Sir Radzig as well. All the other characters introduced are interesting, they have clear moral standings or lack of it, and they have understandable motivations that they act on. And it doesn't feel like a fairy tale or a caricature like the Capon DLC did. And again, it shows how much of a problem even 10 armed men could mean for a region. It's grounded, shows the soldierly companionship of the new characters, and involves you in their dynamic. I think this was a great addition to the game. Another thing in Retai that helps with the story of Henry becoming better and better at fighting is the Retai tourney. This was another Kickstarter stretch goal, and it was added to the main game after release. It happens periodically in the upper castle, and you have to beat up 3 people in a duel to win. If you do, you'll get some great gear and other random rewards, and it's a good way to practice the combat and raise some skills. There are a few quests related to it as well. You can bet on you winning at the Miller, you can act as Capon's champion, who lied about training some recruits to Hanush, so you have to win for him to prove that he trained Henry. There's also the blacksmith in Samapesh, whose son died mysteriously after winning the tournament and needs Henry to figure out what happened. After winning it yourself, one of the combatants will lay a trap for Henry near the mill, and we will have to kill him to defend ourselves. Turns out he doesn't like others winning, so he murdered the blacksmith's son as well. The last big questline in Retai will be given by the executioner who lives outside the town, as being executioner and dealing with the dead bodies is not a very honorable position, more of a necessary thing someone has to do. We meet him first during a quest for Peshek the Miller, who wants to get some money for nursing Henry back after the Skalitz rescue. He wants us to take a ring from an executed person's corpse. We dig up the corpse, but the ring is not there, so we go to the executioner and try to get it from him. There's a bunch of ways to do this, but in the end the ring turns out to be a worthless forgery. Later we hear from an innkeeper that the executioner needs help and find a woman crying outside his house. Her husband was executed and now she has no one to take her in. The executioner has a crush on her but doesn't want to force her to live the pariah lifestyle that comes with the job, so Henry goes to find some other ways. We go to the bailiff to find the family of the late husband. Maybe they'll take her in. We go to them, but they seem like horrible people who want to work the girl day and night for very little, so her choices are not the brightest. Both of them are unsure what to do, but Henry can influence them to try to give each other a chance. Maybe the life of an executioner is not the most honorable, but at least they would live in happiness and a loving household, as much as can be done in a situation like this. So Henry was a matchmaker again, but I really like this story. It shows how ordinary people deal with the difficult position they were put in, and that even those who might be ostracized might create a happy, loving home. After a while, the executioner will need our help again. There's a big execution happening in town, and they brought someone from Kuttenberg to do it. He feels like this is infringing on his territory, so he asks Henry to sabotage the guy's equipment, because if he messes it up, there will be no more outsiders caught for sure, and our executioner can rest assured in his job security. First, we have to figure out what methods he will use, so we will break in to read their sentences. It's in a book in the Rathaus, and based on that we can deduce what method he will use. And plan an appropriate sabotage for each. We break into the Kuttenberg guy's camp at night, and you will really need the perk that makes dogs not bark at you while sneaking, because this will be a nightmare without it. He has 2 bodyguards as well, but they are easy compared to the dogs. Anyway, we poison the tongues so the planned torture doesn't last long. We change the rope so it breaks during the hanging, and we dart the sword so the beheading fails. Herman will be delighted, and we go to see the execution fail. Everyone just stands there before the cutscene starts. It's like a horror movie. You can tell the foreign executioner about the sabotage and he will correct the issues. But I like Herman, so the plan works and the Kuttenberg executioner is embarrassed and disappoints the crowd. Herman will be pleased with our help and thanks us for saving his job, and that concludes his quest. Other than these, Rattay only has a few random quests and activities left that don't give much story. Like getting some escaped birds for the huntsman, you'll have to follow their song and set some traps to get them, and that's it. Henry helps some refugees get jobs at the Rathaus. You will have to interview them and assign them a position that's best suited for each individual. One of them is called Pikmin. They will give rewards for doing so, like a discount at the armorer or training you in a skill. We have to find water carriers and people who empty the latrines, so empty and carry sewage out. You learn some more about the villagers of Skalitz and how they're living life since the attack, but the quest ends after you assign people to do the jobs. Even this small quest shows how much logistics was needed to supply a castle like this with drinking water. Some had wells, some built a cistern to collect rainwater, but if they had access to running water, like in Rattay here, they utilized that as well, of course. And then the other way was drainage, which in this case was done by hand instead of a sewage system. A grueling physical task both ways. There's a request to bring some meat for the refugees, and one of them will send you on some pickpocketing missions that ends with the quest giver getting locked up in the stocks. You can do this after the miller trained you in pickpocketing first. There's a fighting ring among the refugees as well, where you can train unarmed skill and fight for money. And these are so weird to me because you will be wearing your full armor set, but the game doesn't count it in these fights. So it will just look like some peasant is fighting a knight with fists and actually doing damage. There's a questline that starts here and continues in Talberg and Sassau. There's not much story here, they just send you to clear out bandit camps repeatedly and bring back some trophies as proof. This is a great way to increase either stat or combat skills and get a shit ton of loot in the process. The Woman's Lot DLC added dogs to these camps, which if you don't have the perk makes these fights significantly harder, but at a sufficiently high level it shouldn't be a problem. There's also the Miller quests for Peshek, Simon and Wojciech, who sends you to complete random illegal activities. These were one of my favorite things to do in the whole game. One of these was stealing a valuable illuminated manuscript, but unfortunately it's just an item, you cannot look at it. And one of these was bugged for me as the horses I'd needed to steal were just not there. People on the forum said you need to wait for them to appear because they despawned in the Marryat Plague main quest, but they never came back for me. These quests are a great way to get you into robbing everyone blind, but otherwise there's not much story here. So that's it. Rattay is by far the most complex hub of them all, with the most activity, so this was the longest section. And we can move on to our next destination, which is going to be Talmberg. As we've seen before, Talmberg is a smaller castle that belongs to Sir Divish. And let me talk about some real castles here that are similar to the Rattay and Talmberg ones. So you have a small village down the hills where you can look up from, or since the walls are high up, you have beautiful views of the surroundings. And since in the Middle Ages the forests around the castles were usually cut out for visibility and to use in the construction, you would have an even wider area to look out to. So walking up to these is a challenge in itself, and people inside had a good view of who is coming. Once inside, you could easily get lost in the convoluted arrangement of walkways around the walls, or the narrow corridors and stairways throughout the whole building. Sometimes there's a huge town square too in the middle, but just like in Rattay, there could be a whole city inside. You can see how people lived, like how a kitchen worked or how the nobles feasted. And here, for example, there was a huge cathedral in the castle. Unfortunately, only the base of the walls remains. And a lot of these are still being explored, so you can see down in these huge excavations where archaeologists work. Sometimes you can go down into the dungeons yourself and explore dark tunnels and winding stairs that lead to an understructure. I feel really lucky to live in a place where I have such an easy access to places like this, and I really recommend visiting castles like this if you have the chance. The devs themselves organize some events as well in the places where the game takes place, so if you really want to immerse yourself in the world of KCD and have the means to travel there, that's an option as well. But anyway, the side quests in Talmberg. Divish's wife has a side quest for us this time. The quest itself is not anything special. She wants to give wedding gifts to a relative, and Henry needs to gather these 3 things from different settlements. I think fundamentally this quest is there to send the player around the map in the early game, so you have a little bit more of an incentive to visit different places. First, we need some special wine from Rattay. The merchant sold the last bottle of it, and now it's a prize for an archery contest. You can just steal it, but winning the archery contest is also an option. Even if you lose, you can just win a dialogue check and get the wine too. Next, we need a special piece of jewelry from Sasau. They ordered a beautiful stone, but the merchant disappeared with the delivery, so Henry has to investigate. Turns out some bandits killed the merchant, so we kill them in turn and take the stone back to the master, who will make the jeweled crown if you wait a little bit for him to finish the work. Next, we need to deliver a horse from the Ujit stables. When we get there, it turns out the horse doesn't like it if anyone rides him, which would be a problem as a noblewoman's gift. So we have to question the stable hand who knows how to quiet the horse down. Turns out the secret is to sing a little song, which Henry will have to do to take the horse home. After we have done all of this, we talk to Stephanie. She enjoys the stories about her little adventures. As a reward, she wants to give Henry a shirt and wants him to try it on right now. She was very touchy even the first night we met her, and you might see where this is going. In real life, she and Sir Divish had children, but in the game they don't, and she is lonely and unhappy with her life. I think this was specifically changed to allow this conversation to happen, but also there's no children in the game anywhere. So maybe it was just to keep the no children policy of the game. But anyway, she seems completely infatuated with Henry, and Henry is a teenage boy who is easy to take advantage of. So this is also probably why Henry doesn't have a definitive age in the game, because this way we can say maybe he's like early 20s, and so it's not that weird. I get that it's told from Henry's perspective, so I think this is supposed to be a hell yeah brother moment. You even get the alpha male buff after this. But if you think about it for more than 1 second, she's using her power over him to prey on a traumatized, much younger refugee who recently watched all of his loved ones get killed and is left alone in the world. So I don't like her at all, let's just move on. Talmberg also has a village next to it, and the local hunter has been having some problems with poachers in the nearby forests. This questline was incredibly bugged for me, so I'm not sure how well I represent this, but the main idea is you can either join the poachers and help them, or unveil and fight them. There's 2 quests for each of these, and the other one will always fail if you complete one. The way it worked for me was I talked to the villagers and got some gossip, and I heard about some people who mysteriously have an abundance of meat, and about a person named Hennekin Hare, who was the master huntsman before the one we got the quest from. He was jailed for a murder but escaped, and no one knows what happened to him. The new huntsman took up his post and even married his wife. People here have some weird marriages, man. We find a clearing in the forest where the poachers hang out, and you can also find Black Lukash, who is one of the poachers, and he's your in to the organization. He stopped responding for me after a while though, so I was logged out of that route, and I had to betray him to the huntsman. After which the quest popped up that Lukash wants something from me, and it was to say to me I'm in and he wants to introduce me to Hennekin, which obviously makes no sense at all. Then I went to the clearing and the guards attacked without me telling them where we will meet. And then I still had the chance to either side with the guards or Hare. I sided with the soldiers because nothing made any sense anymore, and then he started sprinting into the woods, but I caught up to him. And that's the end. You can get a lot of valuables from the poachers and give the huntsman his ring and get your reward. I like the idea of this quest, how it shows that local bandits and fugitives can achieve a legendary status amongst villagers. Hennekin was said to possess supernatural powers and abilities, but he ended up being just a guy trying to prove that he was right in a dispute years ago. I think if it would have worked as intended, it could have been a great mystery and investigation story, but in this form it was a disjointed mess, to be honest. Talmberg has a DLC questline as well. It's technically for Pribyslavitz, but it starts here, so I'll go over it in the Talmberg section. It's the ruins of the village where the bandits were camping during the main quest. It's in ruins because it was razed a few years ago by Havel Medek, who went on to take Talmberg from Sir Divish for a while before the game takes place. In the art book it says there were originally plans for a questline where the player was tasked with the reconstruction of the village, but it never came to fruition. Later this idea became reality with this DLC. Sir Divish needs help. He sent a person out to inspect Pribyslavitz after our battle with Rant, but this man disappeared and we need to find him. So we travel to the ruins and find some random bandits here. You have a few options about how to deal with them, but the easiest is just to scare them off with a high intimidation stat. They'll leave their valuables in a chest so we can stock up, but the master locator will be here as well, as he was a hostage of the bandits. He's called Marius, and we escort him around the place so he can assess the situation and how a rebuilding process would look like. After we finish the scouting, Divish himself will join us and appoint Henry as bailiff of Pribyslavitz and charge him with overseeing the building efforts. We will have to finance the initial buildings and acquire resources from the region, but we will keep all the profits as well. It's an incredible promotion considering Henry is still a nobody at this point in the story. Sure, a nobody with combat experience, but still a blacksmith's son. So we go to Rattay to make an official announcement that the nobles agreed that people who move here will get some privileges for a while. This should help solve the refugee crisis in the city and the need for settlers for the new town too. After we have a trader in town, we will also need raw materials, so we go around the place asking for stone, lumber, and charcoal shipments that the trader can transport to Pribyslavitz. After that, we can start city planning. The way this works in game terms is that there's a big chest you have to put money in. That's the available funds for construction, and all future profits will materialize daily in this chest too. You'll also have a little book where you decide what to build and give the order to Marius. Then you both run to the construction site, a little cutscene plays, and the new building will be available. There are some spots where you can only build one building out of the two, but mostly the completed town will look the same for everyone. I talked about this in the Pentiment video, but I have to mention again, I really don't like menus where the design is detrimental to the function. So the book, is it immersive this way? Yeah, sure. But it's a pain to use. First, anytime you want to check the stats of the village, you'll have to travel there. I know the main goal is immersion, and this is not a city builder game, but still it's very hard to compare the differences between buildings, having to flip the pages all the time. And if the sun hits it weird, you'll just not see anything anyway. If they wanted to keep the immersion, I think we needed one of those huge blueprint-sized drawings, like the ones they have in Sessau. And that way, a lot of data would have been displayed more as a whole and not just flipping through the pages of individual buildings. So I think building from the book is fine, but a huge planning drawing where you could put in individual buildings to see their effects would have been helpful. At first, this project is a huge money sink, and this is what I was talking about, how stealing and looting funded this whole town. Because you'll need to put in tens of thousands of groschen before you will see significant profits. What you could do is build all the money generating buildings first, then do something else or wait around a few weeks, and then build the ones that cost money to run every day. That way, you'll fund future development by the city itself. And even though it will take a lot of money in the beginning, if you have it fully maxed out, it will still bring in quite a lot of money each day, and you'll never have money problems for the rest of the game. As bailiff, you can also judge people with their petty squabbles and decide what they have to do in disagreements. I don't think these have any effect on the development, it's just an extra activity there to get you into your new role. The DLC ends with restoring the church to its former glory. It will have beautiful frescoes painted, just like the other churches in the game. At this point, Divish visits again and praises us for the work we've done. He gives us the income from the village, and now we have another place to call home in the Rathaus of Pribyslavitz. And that's the end of Talmberg. There are a few activities to hunt and skin animals, and you can even become Master Huntsman. So if that's what you enjoy in KCD, there's a lot of game to be supplied for the nobles here. But not much story for us, so we can move on to Sessau, which is going to be another huge and complex hub for side quests. We haven't been here a lot before, so let's go over what Sessau is all about. The most prominent building in the town is the monastery that sits atop a hill on the riverside. Next to it, there are a few houses for the people who help with the monastery, and then in a bit further for the travelers. On the other side, there's a town proper with all the vendors you'd need, and a separate church. This is also a real place in real life. Some buildings, for example this church, is just a ruin now, but they recreated it for the game. Other buildings, like the monastery itself, are still standing today. Saint Procopius lived around the area as a hermit, and he attracted fellow hermits, and they together founded a Benedictine monastery around the year 1000, and this became what we see in-game. You can find a lot of wounded from Skalitz here who ended up in the monastery infirmary. Johanka is here, she survived the raids as well and now helps tend the wounded. Their situation is not the best though, their resources are limited and there's only her and brother Nicodemus helping them. So these two are flooded with work. Henry can help out by bringing them some food and talking to the custodian about more money for the wounded. We also learn that he's very pushy towards Johanka, but she's trying to deal with it herself and asks Henry not to interfere. Anyway, Henry can pay for the extra supplies himself and the custodian agrees to help. And first aid skill helps with actually tending to them as well, changing bandages, setting a broken bone, or finding the right herb or potion. Johanka will be grateful for saving a lot of lives, and the quest ends without any particular fanfare. By the way, I wanna recommend the book because medieval medicine and theories about how bodies work from this time are fascinating to me. It's titled Medieval Bodies if you're interested at all about how people thought of their bodies and the treatments they used for different ailments. It details the humoral theory where the body was thought to be regulated by an equilibrium of 4 internal systems, or the practice of bloodletting where purposefully draining blood from someone was thought to be getting rid of a bad humor that was maybe overactive in the patient, or it was done as preventative medicine as well in perfectly healthy people, where draining blood from them in actuality probably just made things worse. And the book really goes through all the body parts and what healers of the time from all around the world thought of their internal workings. It's fascinating. And it's here in the monastery infirmary that another DLC questline starts. This is the other part of the woman's lot, the Madonna of Sessau. And this time the main character is Johanka. She was in the flashback with Teresa where she wanted to be invited to the party by Matthias, and in the aftermath of the Merhoyat plague she travels there herself to help him and the villagers. Matthias even gets transported to the monastery infirmary because he doesn't react to treatments and is still feverish. To actually start the DLC, we travel to Johanka's lodgings in the monastery courtyard and ask her how things are. She is swamped with work and is very stressed, and she complains of having recurring dreams that don't let her sleep. Asking about this starts the quest, and turns out the Virgin Mary appears to her. In her dreams, she travels with Mary to a cave near Skalitz, but when she enters, the devil appears and kills Johanka and she wakes up. Henry promises to check out the cave and see if the dream has any meaning in real life, but both of them are kind of skeptical about the whole thing. We find the mineshaft she described near Skalitz, and it turns out there is actually something going on. We find a bunch of corpses down here that were disposed through a shaft leading up to the hills. We saw this in the Theresa questline as well, but mining was a huge undertaking in this time period, requiring a lot of timber and complicated mechanisms to get the water and the mined ore, of course, out of the tunnels. These were also used to get some ventilation in. You can see the remains of these around here, and I thought that was pretty cool. So we go check out what's happening near the entrance there. there's a miner's hut nearby, and we find a solitary soldier drinking alone. He wears the Skalitz uniform and claims to be one of the town guards who hid after the attack, but Henry doesn't know him, so his lie crumbles pretty fast. He also confesses to the murder and disposal of those bodies we found and wants to add Henry to the pile too, so you will have to defeat him. Or you can skip all this by stealth killing him and looting his stash after. So we report back to Johanka, who tells us about the different dreams she's had. She thinks the first dream was a test from the Virgin Mary, and now Johanka is supposed to tell the people her message. Johanka thinks she has to do all these things, so the Virgin Mary hears Matthias of whatever it is that ails him. So we pick her up in the morning and we walk to the town square where she can preach her message. We talk about how life has been since the raid, how life is in the monastery for her, and how Henry feels about being in the service of Sir Radzig. It's a very peaceful morning walk, which is a nice change and contrast to all the fighting and intrigue that's happening all the time in the area. And they both seem to be relatively happy about their current situation and hopeful about the future. After the walk, she starts talking, but at first no one really notices. She really gets into it though, and the crowd gathers slowly. The voice actor is doing a great job with this performance. There's a lot of emotion in her voice.
We are those sinners, and we must once again build those mighty walls. Not from stone or wood, but from virtue and love for our neighbors.
And by the end, Johanka gets a lot of people listening to the Virgin Mary's message. After, the tailor's wife asks for help. Her husband likes gambling a bit too much and she wants Johanka to help him somehow. She doesn't have any idea how to do that, but Henry proposes that were Ambrose to lose all that he has on dice, he would surely come to his senses. We find him in the tavern. The plan is to get him drunk, steal his stuff from him, and after he wakes up, tell him that he lost everything last night on dice. To do this, you have to outdrink him, where he blacks out, but Henry doesn't. You can black out too, but then you wake up the next morning and the plan and the quest with it will fail. So you'll require a high drinking skill. So for this quest I went around for days eating nothing but drinking beer and, quote, leveling up my drinking. A truly great alcoholism simulator. If you outdrink him, he will be sleeping on the desk, so you can just take his stuff. Lie to him in the morning and he will promise to give up gambling. He will even give you his dice that you can throw down the well to prevent him from playing again. You can keep the money, but to get the best ending of the quest, Henry will tell him the Virgin Mary sent him to teach Ambrose the error of his ways, and he gives him the money back. After this, Johanka has another job the Virgin Mary needs doing. A bathhouse maid wants to find a more virtuous job after listening to the town square speech. She's in Ledechko and currently is entertaining an aggressive patron. Henry barges in, beats him up, and promises the girl to escort her to the monastery where she can help out with Johanka. On the way, the guy we just beat up ambushes us with some friends, but we can even just run from them, so we arrive back to the monastery safely. We find some other troublemakers here though. They were hired by someone who doesn't like Johanka and they are here to cause problems. They don't tell Henry the exact person, just that it's an important citizen. Henry scares them off easily, and the next person that wants help from the Virgin Mary is a merchant at the inn. He's burdened by a sin that he committed a long time ago. He hid some wealth in the forest and needs Henry to recover it. The merchant wants to donate this treasure to those in need. So we hike up to a trail to an abandoned, overgrown village. On the way there are some corpses lying about, so something is up. Turns out humans have set up camp here, so Henry has to deal with them before he can search for the treasure. We find the money and can donate it to a bunch of people, even to the infirmary. I gave it to the bailiff and to the town. It doesn't really matter who you give it to. If you donate the money in his name, he will be content and thank you profusely for your help. In the meantime, Johanka got another message and she wants to preach again, this time in the meadow outside the town. Some troublemakers attack again, and to get the good ending, you need to not use any weapons in dealing with them. Luckily, a lot of people help and we win in the fistfight. The next sinner Johanka wants to help is Henry himself. She lists out all the bad things he's done so far, which is really funny, and there's also the option to say the line to her that he's been saying to the guards to get out of jail time.
I had a secret assignment.
Ah, that must have been very secret indeed. You had everyone in the whole province fooled.
The way we have to do penance is walk to Auschwitz and pray at the Church of the Virgin Mary. Henry needs to wear only a penitent's robe and walk barefoot, and pray at all the shrines on the way there. These conciliation crosses are all across the land near the roads and represent some historical or tragic event of the people living here. It was built as an admission of guilt, a plea for forgiveness, and they mark the boundaries of estates as well. Now, Auschwitz is a long way. If you ride your horse, they will know. And with fast travel, you'd miss the shrines, so actually walking it is. I really like this part though. It's a nice stroll through the landscape, and it's such a different side of Henry himself. He really gets into Johanka's teaching and seems to sincerely believe it when he says he won't steal again. But narrators note he will. And we see the roads from a different point of view as well. We are not a knight on some errand now, we're just a humble pilgrim walking and praying for absolution. We're like those wayfarers we've seen along the road now. I'm not sure I was just lucky, but there was no attack for me during this quest, and it was a very peaceful, meditative experience. We arrive in Auschwitz and pray to the Blessed Virgin for forgiveness. We also have to make a small donation to the church. If you've actually walked barefoot all the way, Godwin will be impressed with you and believe you when you say you're more devout now. He'll even give you a manuscript he thinks might be of interest. This is the Matthew of Janov manuscript, who was a theologian and is regarded as one of the most significant Czech reformers before Jan Hus. So again, you know exactly where Father Godwin stands in this debate. He is much more concerned with everyday people and their well-being than the material conditions of the church itself, it seems. When we go back to tell all this to Johanka, we find she's been jailed for her teachings and there's an inquisitor in town investigating her case. He wants to find out if the Virgin Mary is really visiting Johanka or if she's committing heresy. The way he wants to do this is to have a hearing with a bunch of witnesses, interrogate them, and weigh this evidence to arrive at the verdict. He will ask a few questions from Henry as well, and you'll need to be truthful, even about Johanka's not so virtuous side. She ended up having an affair with the custodian, but he forced himself on her. But you don't have to tell him everything. So we ask all the people we helped so far to testify, and if you've done everything correctly, they will help her. The local priest, Father Fabian, and the swordsmith's wife, Katra, will not help whatever you do. They think Johanka does more harm than good. You can also talk to Johanka herself, but you have to steal a document from the Inquisitor to fool the guards. You can convince her to respect the court and behave with humility to give herself the best chance of getting out alive. Even if this goes against her beliefs, she will see the wisdom in this and accept in order to be free again. And Matthias is recovered, so she will believe her quest is done and the Virgin Mary rewarded her already. Matthias sends her his lucky dice too, and we know from the Theresa questline this item was what started their romance. The trial itself is a very long cutscene. With a high enough speech skill and with helping all those people, you can defend her successfully. We learn that Katra hired those mercenaries and confront the custodian with how he preyed on Johanka and dismiss Father Fabian's arguments as well. We also hear about some other historical figures, women who have been visited by visions. The good ending is that she has to admit she does not understand these matters fully and has to recant her teachings and publicly apologize for undermining the authority of the Holy Church. And I think this is such a good conclusion, and it works so much better than the Theresa questline. This is such a chilling cutscene with her in rags in front of all those powerful people, speaking now not in the name of the Blessed Virgin to help people, but a forced confession to keep the others in power. And it shows the issues of a woman's lot part a lot better as well. They speak to her as if she were a child. They tell her next time she has ideas of philosophizing, she should talk to one of the priests, and the learned man will take care of it. She is shown completely powerless, even in her attempt to help her neighbors. And it's genuinely very sad. We can at least take comfort in the fact that she's alive and reunited with Matthias, and they have a chance for a happy life now. And as a story, this questline worked really well too. It was a bunch of random side quests here as well, but it made sense to do all this. We were helping the random penitents who wanted to get help from the Virgin Mary, and it always came back to Johanka, whose story constantly developed on its own too. When Henry was doing something else, she wasn't just sitting in her room waiting. She was hearing other believers or even being imprisoned, but it felt like something was always happening. She also did this to save her love interest, but the story is also so much more complex, and there's a lot of other, deeper issues being explored as well. If you can defend her well enough, the bad ending is that she gets lashes and her tongue will be cut out. She and Matthias will both die a few days later. Getting that ending after you tried your best must be infuriating, but even that story has a point about how powerless ordinary people are in matters of the church. Overall, I really like this questline, and I think it's one of the most powerful stories in the game. And as a cool epilogue, you can even invite them to live in Pribyslavitz if you have it upgraded and if they both survive the whole ordeal. And remember Matthew and Fritz, the other two boys from the original gang? Their questline starts here as well. We find them first loitering about the tavern. They have a hard time finding work, so Henry promises to ask around. There is a prologue quest to this as well, where we find out they got into a fight in the monastery, so they were thrown out of the infirmary. But this was completely bugged for me, and I didn't get to see it myself. To get them a job, first we talk to Teresa and she recommends trying to ask around the mills. Maybe someone needs helping hands. At the Ledechko mill, they're happy to take them. Must be nice to just walk up to a place and get hired without an 8-step interview process. After a while, Henry goes back to check up on them and they are not happy. The foreman works them to the bone and there's no talking to him. He's just an average middle manager who enjoys abusing the little power he has. At least this is accurate to the modern workplace. But anyway, they want Henry to talk to him and there's a few ways to deal with this. I ended up choosing to duel him and his friends 3v3 in the fields. We win and we leave again with the hope that their life will be better now. Next time we find them is at the inn in the glade. The Ledechko innkeeper can give you a hint that they fled. Turns out they stole the foreman's ring and they had to leave. They even give Henry a bit of money as his share for helping them beat the guy up. So clearly they're not cut out for real work and they have some plans again. They want to raid the wagons carrying supplies for Sigismund's soldiers. First we need to convince the innkeeper to help. Promising a share of the loot for him alleviates his concerns about illegality, and he advises us to get a disguise. A full set of Cuman armor for each. According to him, if we dress up as Cumans, no one will go after us, as everyone already knows Cumans are looting around the area. And the Cuman helmets are closed, so no one will recognize us either. The easiest way to do this is during the Pribyslavitz fight. Where everyone's fighting, you can just loot 3 sets of armor no problem. Otherwise, you'll have to attack Cuman camps and defeat them all at once. Anyway you get these, when you give them to the innkeeper, they will not be pleased. The 3 of them think just the real Cuman armor sets don't look Cuman enough. Their perception is warped by folk tales and want the armor to be scarier, so we go to the local loudmouth who describes these folk tales. Cumans are demons who drink blood and sing demonic songs and cast spells, etc. We gather some more folk tales from people all around the map and end up getting stuff like wolf fangs, dog hides and raven feathers to decorate the real armor. Now the armor looks scary and pagan enough, everyone's satisfied and the quest is done. Matthew says we're only just getting started, but to do that we have to find a stealing charcoal burner first for Andrew. There are 2 quests after this with them, but it was just completely bugged for me. Their plan is to rob a shipment of the Thornburg quarry. Even Andrew is apprehensive about this, and he wants us to sell the boys out to Captain Robard. If you do this, the shipment will have guards, and the 2 of them will be killed. You can turn on Andrew and split the loot with the others, or turn on all of them, snitch on them to Captain Robard, and they will be hanged next to the inn. None of this happened to me as the quest just got stuck in a state and never progressed whatever I did. I think the character arc of these 2 work, even if there are big jumps. I think there's supposed to be a counter story to Henry. Henry, who is always lucky, fails upwards, everything he does turns out to be a success, everyone he meets ends up helping him or flirting with him. And there are Matthew and Fritz, who try doing a lot of different things but never really find their place. They try increasingly insane ideas and in the end up dead. I've heard in one of the interviews that there were a lot of cuts to their story, but I think it still works, and it provides a nice contrast. It shows you what Henry could have been if he wasn't so lucky all the time. And with them and all the big quest lines in Sasau, there's a few more though that involve characters we already know. One is the charlatan who, before fleeing to Ledechko, flees his people in Sessau. He speaks nonsense and wants us to help him by becoming his apprentice, which means we will have to fetch him a few things. We need a branch from a church. This can be found outside the monastery, and it's really weird because they put a plank here and it would make sense that you have to walk out and grab it. But if you try, you will fall to your death. What you have to do is shoot it down with an arrow. Sure. Next we need a cat's paw talisman from a lucky dice player in the tavern. You can win it from him in dice or just buy it. This part is nothing special. The next, however, is a tooth from Saint Procopius. Remember the hermit who founded the monastery. Now finding a tooth from him might be a bit too challenging. So the charlatan recommends getting a tooth from a worker named Procopius. That might have special powers as well. The guy has a toothache right now, so we are in luck. Now we just have to convince him to pull it. Around this time there was no modern dentistry or anesthesia in the current sense, so he would have to go to the blacksmith to do it. And he is understandably afraid of that. Henry can talk him into it though, telling him how it might be even worse if he just lets it in. So in the end he agrees. On the way we have to nudge him when he loses courage, but he makes it to the blacksmith and the deed is done. This is one of the most terrifying quests, to be honest. Going to the dentist is already scary, but imagine what it must feel like to have a blacksmith do it. Just truly horrific. After bringing all the stuff back to him, it turns out the charlatan's tasks are not finished yet. We need a shroud from someone who died recently. There's one person in the church, yet unburied, who is a good candidate, so Henry asks around about him. And if you have a high enough speed skill, you can convince the mourning guy next to the body that you are a distant relative. This way he will turn his back on you to pray and you can just take the shroud. The charlatan doesn't want Henry to give it out in the open, so we have to meet him at his house. While doing business here, an angry mob appears, probably a gathering of people who he swindled. He escapes through the window and we are left to deal with the crowd. We can convince them that we were here to teach him a lesson too, but he's already fled. This part is true. They will leave disappointed, but the quest is complete, and next we will meet the charlatan is in Ledechko for the Cape and DLC quest we already covered. He's a great and unusual character that adds a lot of flavor to all the stories he's involved in. I think he knows exactly what he's doing, he just learned the exact language that's needed to scam people, so he speaks in riddles and enigmatic sentences that might sound believably supernatural to people who don't know much about the word. And the charlatan's only goal is to keep this supernatural aura about himself, and the moment it's shattered, he's gone. He travels to a new place and builds it from scratch. Henry helping him is also interesting, because I think he's doing it just for the sake of adventure. In the main quest, he is generally concerned with upholding a moral standard and justice for the people of these lands, but in the side quests, he has no problem with spooking them with a ghost or helping to scam them with a lucky charm. I think Henry doesn't really think about the consequences of the charlatan's actions that much, and just wants to see what's gonna happen next, just like the player. Brother Nicodemus also needs some help. First we need to weed his garden. He specifies which flowers are weeds and you have to pick those and only those. After we're successful, he tasks us with collecting a bunch of samples for a new book. So we have to collect one of each plant. You can just buy these as well, and give him an old book too, so he can scrape off the old writing and can use the parchment to write his new book. And with these, the quest is done. There's a quest here where two blacksmiths are having a dispute and want to solve it by trial of combat. Henry has to wear an armor one of them made to prove its good quality, or lose on purpose to prove it's not the best. Alternatively, you can just steal the armor and bring it to the other to get a reward. The quest shows some interesting aspects of two people trying to do the same profession in a small town, but there's not much overall story here. A few other quests related to the monastery. One is to get some remains of Saint Procopius for a guard near the custodian's house, as it seems like everyone wants a piece of him for good luck. During the construction of the church here, they excavated Procopius's cave. It's basically empty, though you can bring the guard back a wall you find there. At the time, a relic was thought to have healing properties, so actually kissing or touching one was thought to bring good health. Maybe that's what he wants with it. He expected something more, but he's grateful and asks you to bring it back where you found it. So this whole thing is just borrowing and not stealing from a saint. If you don't bring it back, he will start a fight with you after a while, calling you a thief. The game will not forget, even if you do. The monastery has another problem. There was an accident at the construction site, and everyone suspects the fault lies with the quality of the stone. It comes from the Thornberg quarry, and it's in Sir Divish's best interest to get to the bottom of this, so the quarry's reputation is not damaged. It's a small investigation again. You interview people about late shipments and late payments and the ins and outs of the hierarchy of the building site. It's actually really interesting to play a role in the construction of a building that still stands today, so Henry has a lasting effect on the region even besides all the fighting and politics of the nobles. During the investigation, you learn about the rumor of a curse and a demon's skull that Leszek, a worker here, dug up. Everyone's saying it's a bad omen and the reason for the accident. We find the skull and have it examined, and it turns out someone stuck deer antlers on a human skull. Seems like someone's stealing and is trying to blame the unusual happenings on a curse. You can also talk to the Thornberg quarrymaster, and he will tell you that the stone is not his and someone must have exchanged the Thornberg stone to a worse quality stone on site. We tried to find the guy who supposedly dug up the demon's skull, but he disappeared. The master builder's assistant, Smola, says that Leszek said he wanted to meet at the scaffolding tonight because he wanted to confess something. We agree to accompany the assistant, but when we get there, the place is empty and someone throws a brick at us from up the scaffolding. We climb and the guy attacks, which is visually a pretty cool fight at night up the scaffolding in the rain. After beating him up, he confesses that someone set him up to kill Henry in exchange for forgiving his debt. The person behind it is the master builder's assistant himself, who we were supposed to escort here. Smola in the meantime went after Leszek at the nearby mill, so we run to save him, but it's too late and he's already killed. Smola tries to lie about it, but after confronting him, he attacks and we kill him too. Even this small quest has a lot of options where you can arrive at the mill in time, for example, if you don't fight the guy on top, or just find Leszek yourself and question him about Smola. Either way, you get rid of him, Sir Divish will be happy his quarry's name is cleared and reward Henry. Now there's only a few activities remaining. Another one for the hunting enthusiasts to get meat for the local butcher, another for me specifically where you have to steal a bunch of stuff. A farmhand wants revenge for a rejection. He wants to punish a wealthy farmer he worked for by stealing his amulet, punish his mate for rejecting the farmhand and trying to get with the tailor, and punish the tailor himself. The tailor here means Ambrose, by the way. We've met him during the Yohanka DLC. So besides gambling, looks like he's unfaithful too. We steal a tinderbox from him as the farmhand wants to burn down the farmhouse and blame the fire on the tailor. After a while, you'll hear the villagers gossip about how he failed and got hanged for it. Another activity is gathering the pieces of a legendary sword for the weaponsmith. A wandering pilgrim sold a bunch of fragments to blacksmiths, and he assured them these were from the legendary sword of the Queen of Sheba. She was a biblical figure who presented King Solomon with valuable gifts. The fragments are all over the map. One you get as a reward for getting Pickman a job in Rattay, but the rest you can buy or steal from the various blacksmiths. Giving them back to him, he reforges the sword and sells it to you. The pilgrim was not lying, at least in the sense that it's a powerful weapon and well worth the effort. You can also give beer to this guy locked up in the stocks, but I don't know what this is about. And with that, we are done with Sessau and we can move on to Užits. Užits is a relatively small village crossed by a small stream that is not the Sessau River for a change. It has a big horse trader on the hills, and probably the most prominent feature is the Church of the Virgin Mary, headed by Godwin. I also added the inn in the glade to this section. It's technically not part of the town, but it's nearby, so I just put it here. Also, the scale of the side quests are more limited in the remaining towns, so don't expect long quest lines from this point. Let's start with the stables here. One of their best horses escaped, and they set Henry on it to try to track it down. It was last seen at the crossroads, so we had head there and follow the signs it left behind. We ask for help on the road. This is the same camp we stayed at in the hunting quest with Capon. And we follow the trail to a charcoal burner's camp and then deeper into the forest. Some guy already found it and claimed it as his, and we need him to clear off. Again, you can bribe him, beat him up, or just lie to him, but eventually you'll get the horse back to the stables. You get a caparison as a reward, which is a decorative cloth layer you can put on your horse to make it look more elegant. Father Godwin needs Henry's help with a few things as well, and they all involve some heresy and sacrilege. First is some gossip about the local herb woman getting young girls into witchcraft, and Henry needs to find out what happened. She confesses she sold some magic ointment to 3 local girls, an ointment which, as she describes it, has psychedelic properties. The girls each lost someone dear to them recently and are grieving and want to use the ointment to talk to the dead. After selling them the magic ointment, the herb woman now second guesses herself, as it might be also poisonous if used wrongly, and people might see this as witchcraft, which would mark the end of the road for the girls. So she asks Henry to figure out what they're up to. We follow them into the woods. There's already spooky things happening on the way there, but it turns out they are doing a ritual. Henry tries to stop them, but the girls are already high out of their minds and think he is the devil. They offer to fulfill his every wish if he fulfills theirs. They explain that their wish is to rid the land of the Cumans, and Henry tries to talk to them, but the ointment got into him as well, and now he starts seeing visions. Everyone turns into animals in his mind. He tries to piece together what is happening, and then he has to lockpick a chicken. Then some demons attack and Henry passes out. The demons turn out to be woodcutters, and neither Godwin nor the herb woman will be too happy we killed them. You can just run away and then the women will be killed, or have the woodcutters kill the women as well. In all cases, the quest givers will be horrified that people died for this. Another quest that involves Godwin starts at Hanush in Rattay. Vicar has come to Uzhitz to hunt heretics, but Hanush is afraid he was also sent to undermine his authority in the region on behalf of the Archbishop. And if there's some scheming, he wants it to stop. We could do this by telling the vicar Sir Hanush sent us to help him, but our goal is he finds nothing and leaves convinced that everything is in order. So we go offer our services and the vicar accepts. He gives us a record of an interrogation where one of the heretics described their meeting place. Sometimes these types of documents survive to this day, and it's so interesting to read about what some people came up with about the workings of the word. From the church's point of view, obviously this is unacceptable, so the vicar is here to get rid of this kind of nonsense. He thinks Henry is ugly enough to blend in.
But you're an ordinary lad with a likable face, if a bit simple looking. You'll have a much better chance of learning their secrets.
So we're off to investigate. We have to follow a cryptic description from a book and follow its directions, just like an average Morrowind quest. It was very nostalgic. But anyway, we find the gathering place in a clearing, and there's a carved wooden cross. So the vicar is looking in the right place, unfortunately, and there are heretics here. We need to find who the cross belongs to. So Henry and his likable face ask around. Father Godwin will know, and he's on the side of the heretics, or at least on the side of the locals, but definitely opposing the vicar. He does not want anyone to come to harm because of this. After reassuring him that we don't want burnings either, he tells us that it belongs to the Bauer family. First we agreed to make sure that they are the heretics, so we sneak up on their farm and hide in the attic and listen in. They are afraid of the vicar and pray in an unusual manner, so they most certainly are. They are Waldensians, by the way, which is a movement that moved into Bohemia from France, where it was founded in the 12th century by Peter Waldo. They don't agree with the church in many ways, mostly in their insistence on worldly, voluntary poverty. They don't regard the relics and icons and statues highly at all, and they have their own stricter interpretation of the Holy Scripture. Later they joined the Protestant movement, and so this is the type of thinking that the vicar wants to eradicate at its root. But anyway, we report back to Godwin, who wants Henry to convince them to run. That is the logical choice that would satisfy Hanush and get rid of the vicar without finding anything, so that's what we do. You can narc on them though, and then they will burn for heresy probably, but with a high enough speed skill, it's easy to convince her that she is more valuable to God alive, so she can spread the true faith. She will see the wisdom in running and starts packing, but directly after saying this, she just goes back to sleep, which is really funny. If you tell the vicar the farm was empty when you got there, he will find that enough evidence of their guilt, so he decides to chase after them and leave. Hanush is pleased the vicar is gone, and Godwin is happy no one was burned. A job well done. Here in Uzhitz is where you learn how to read too. You have to go to the scribe and spend a few days there. He will give you books to practice, and in the end you gain the ability to read, and that's it. So from now on, you will be able to read the in-game lore books that give you some more context to all the characters or the area or other people and their customs. Or you can just collect them as well. These are sometimes transliterations of chapters from real chronicles that were important sources for the writing in the game. This is just an addition to the in-game codex that is a full book in itself, complete with illustrations for the entries and a lot of info to read about anything you might be interested in. The in-game books can be written by an unreliable narrator, but these entries are based on historical knowledge from our time, so it's more exact. The society section has a lot of basics of European medieval life explained, so if you're not from here, for example, you can get up to speed pretty quickly. And you will be able to read skill books too, which increase the relevant skills just by reading a bit. All the skill books in the game are so cool. They have unique illustrations, just like an illuminated manuscript, and now you can do stuff like reading about strength and getting stronger. Amazing. If you sit down, you will study them faster because Henry is comfortable, so it's worth it to find a place to study. There's a fight club here in Uzhitz, just like the one in Ratai. This one is organized by the local fishermen, and it works the same. You beat up some guys and get money for it. There's also a hunting quest at the inn, same thing we've seen, bring meat to the innkeeper. And the last activity in these areas is a mini quest line that starts in front of the inn. An old prostitute was not paid for services rendered, so we need to steal the money from the customer. Next, she wants a piece of clothing from a local woman. She says it was hers and traded it for food, but wants it back. After doing it, she tells us a bit about herself. She was a farmer's wife, but her husband had an affair and threw her out. And now she works on the streets, so to speak. She wants Henry to steal an ornamented dagger back from her ex-husband in Neuhof. We do it, and now she wants us to steal the key for a trunk that still contains her dowry, which her former husband kept. The more she talks about them, the more obvious is that she's incredibly angry still, and she talks in an obscured way about how she's going to get her revenge first, and then we get our reward for helping her. After doing all this, she says she's happy now and to come back tomorrow for our big reward. But the next day she's not there. We can ask Andrew and he will tell that the ex-husband and his new wife were killed, his balls were cut off, and her eyes scratched out. The farmhouse was trashed and robbed. No one is sure if the old woman did it, but Andrew thinks we will never see her again. So our big reward is gone, but I still really like this little storyline, because it reminds you that even if Henry does things without thinking much of the time, all his actions can have grave consequences. And I really like how she takes initiative, has a plan, deceives Henry and achieves everything she wants, and then leaves. Go off, Queen. We leave as well, and we can move on to Ledechko. It's the small town we visited for the Capon DLC, but there are some other side stuff here as well. One starts with a rumor the Ledechko blacksmith heard. It's about his colleague in Sasau, who is said to chant spells while working, which makes his products more durable. With a high enough speed skill, Henry reminisces about his past helping out his father at the forge, and the Sasau blacksmith opens up about his methods. Turns out he's only reciting a rhyme to help him time the steps of the process, and that he does things uniquely too. You can also just stay around and listen to him sing while working. Going back to Ledechko, we can talk about his unique methods and repeat the little poem to get our reward. Another person who needs help is the butcher's widow. She asked the local herb woman to help her exorcise her neighbor's spirit that haunts her. The herb woman cannot make the trip, so she asks Henry to help the widow. She complains about insomnia and not being able to sleep, but if you sneak into her house at night, she's asleep. Anyway, we need flowers from the deceased grave and 10 poppies and then burn the whole bunch at the haunted house. The ritual unfortunately doesn't work and we need to ask help elsewhere. The alchemy vendor in Rattay is our man. He's apprehensive about the topic at first as he doesn't want to be accused of heresy. After a bit of nudging, he opens up and tells us that he knows of a book that might help. It's held in the prohibited books section at the monastery's library, so we have our work cut out for us. Fortunately, it is possible to sneak in during the night from the second floor of the building where Johanka lives. You go around a bunch of guardhouses and end up in the monastery library, which is fully empty at night, so you can just take the Necronomicon and leave. The apothecary reads it and says he will help. After we get something from the house the ghost lived in and ask a few more questions from the widow too. Now she explains the backstory a bit more. The neighbor had a wife who was an unpleasant person and their marriage was unhappy. The wife was the one who burned their house down with the guy inside. After the incident, the wife completely lost her mind and died as well. This is the story that doesn't let the neighbor rest, so we go back to the apothecary and bring him to the wife's grave to perform the ritual. In the morning, it turns out even that was not enough. So now we go to Godwin for help, as even Henry is getting fed up with the woman. Godwin says the dead only rise on Judgment Day, so this is probably something weighing on the widow's conscience. So we go back to her and ask her to finally tell the whole truth. She had an affair with the neighbor his wife found out, and that's how the whole house burning came to be. Henry encourages the widow to tell the late neighbor's still living kids the whole story and says that that might help ease the spirit, and also to have a memorial cross made to make up for old misdeeds. And it's still not over. Henry has to personally go to the quarry in Thornburg to have the cross made and delivered. We get a nice cutscene in the end about how relieved the widow feels now, and finally this long story can be put to rest. And Henry can move on from being a personal therapist to this woman. This is the quest I dislike the most in the whole game. It's so long and boring and repetitive. All you do is just run around wherever this person sends you, just so she doesn't have to face her own life choices. Get me out of here. The mill to the east of Ledechko has a captive Cuman they want to interrogate, but no one speaks Hungarian. The captive is supposed to be hiding a stash of money, so Henry goes to find a translator. The interrogation starts, and it's such a little detail, but he's the only one who speaks the language with a heavy accent. The Cuman voice actors are usually fluent speakers, so they say their lines properly, but this translator character speaks Hungarian with a heavy accent, because it's a second language to him. Also in the subtitles, they spell Rattay according to Hungarian phonetic spelling. Small details like this are so cool to me. They talk a lot between each other, which might be suspicious to Henry, but I can't really judge how well they hide it because I have the buff IRL that makes me understand them. So I knew from the start that they are trying to mess with me. If you believe them, the captive will say he'll take you there, but he will take you to a Cuman ambush and you'll most probably die. You can confront the translator about the inconsistencies and he will come clean and give you the full translation about the hiding place of the money. This way the captive will take you to the real thing. You take half the money, the other half is the miller's, and you can take the Cuman to Rattay to the jail. In that case, the bailiff will also be happy with you and give you some reward. The only thing left in Ledechko is an archery contest where you shoot logs floating down the river. Otherwise, we go to the next settlement. The only questline here is the Thornburg horse race. It started by the widow at the stud farm, who confides in Harry that the business is not going well since the attack we investigated during the main quest. The most important customer they had was Sir Divish himself, but he stopped buying after the husband died. We are tasked with taking one of their best horses to Thornburg to show him that they still breed excellent horses and to try to convince Sir Divish to buy again. Turns out his only problem is that Zora is a woman and raising horses is a man's work. He has the idea to hold a horse race though, and whoever wins, that's where he's gonna buy horses from. Henry obviously will be the representative of the Neuhof farm here, so we take Zora's horse and the contest begins. The race itself is not very hard and you don't need a high horsemanship skill either. You have to touch certain checkpoints along the way, but between them it's up to you. So while the opponents are taking the roads all the time, Henry can just hike through the foliage and take huge shortcuts to win and no one will care. So Sir Divish is convinced to buy from her again. There's an optional step to bring Zora her horse back, but if you don't do it and just leave it here, the poor horse will be rooted in the exact spot you left it, and even during the last quest, during a big battle, it will just stand there. After saving the business of the horse farm, there's not much else here, so we move on. The last area we haven't talked about is the area of the Cuman raid from the beginning of the game. Even outside the flashback with Teresa, there are some activities and quests to do around here. Most of them don't start here though, as not so many people still live in the area after the raid. First is a quick treasure hunt. Kunesh, the guy we beat up in the prologue, survived the raid and is a beggar in Ratai. Henry reminds him of the debt he still owes his father, but Kunesh doesn't have any money. So he tells us about some hidden treasure that's under the rubble. Going back to Skalitz, the treasure is actually there, but it contains a goblet that belonged to Baron. At this point the quest is over and you can just keep the money or give the stuff back to Baron himself. Next time you see Kunesh, you can forgive his debt too. Another one starts at Master Feifar, the chief engineer of Sir Radzig. This is the old man Teresa was supposed to marry. He thinks someone is stealing the silver from the abandoned mines, so he wants us to check out a few places around the mines to gather evidence. Henry could even corroborate these rumors by some information he got for getting a water-carrying job to the miner guy in the previous side quest. Feifar wants Henry to arrest the leader of the operation, so off we go. By the way, this is the same place you were playing as Teresa, so you really feel the difference in gameplay. With an over-leveled Henry, you can just murder everyone. Unfortunately, this quest also has some weird scripting. I'm not sure if it's a bug or intended, but if you go to the mines before all the other places, which I did obviously, the quest will progress and you will be locked out of uncovering all there is to learn. There is a guard outside the mines, so something is up for sure. And going in, we hear arguing from above, and a person falls to their death. Henry falls from the fright as well, and the others blame it on him, telling him that if he hadn't come sniffing around, none of this would have happened. But in my case, I just arrived, I don't even know who these people are. And then they attack and Henry has to run. At least the corpse's name turns out to be Nimoy, the guy we were supposed to arrest. Henry escapes the mines and tells Master Feifar Nimoy tried to kill him and he had to kill him in turn. Feifar is kinda disappointed that now he will not learn anymore, and that's it. Even the wiki says that this quest is very buggy, so I just didn't try any other way and accepted that the stealing is probably done now after killing the leader. Who those other people were, I don't know. Another quest starts in Ravna, or what remains of it. A villager sits here alone and he says all the others left, but the people of Ravna are sure to come back. He thinks the only thing keeping them away is that the village doesn't have a priest anymore. The villagers want spiritual guidance and someone to protect their souls. And the parish of St. James, which is named after the patron of miners, cannot stand empty. So he tasks us to find Father Simon, a parish priest who worked in Skalitz before, but ran away after he was revealed to be in love with his housekeeper. People say he's become a hermit, so it will not be easy. We started the family of the housekeeper, they live at a farm nearby. The girl died in childbirth after the affair, and Simon seems to blame himself for it, which explains his running away. The family put up a cross in her name, and recently flowers have been turning up next to it, so we have a lead. We find the cross and explore the area. Simon turns out to be captured by some bandits, but there's only 2 of them and Henry easily scares them off. The father is ridden with guilt, but Henry can persuade him to go back. He points out that many people break their commandments, but the fact that Simon takes the matter so seriously shows that he is a good person and a priest worthy of leading the congregation at Ravna. And that even sinners have their duty to their fellow Christians. It's really interesting to have these theological arguments come out of Henry, who I think just stumbles upon them by pure intuition, and maybe his skill in rhetoric. Because he for sure didn't learn this from his father or Captain Bernard, but he did talk about some philosophical stuff with Sir Radzig, so maybe that's where this is coming from. But this is another way of showing him grow as a person. Anyway, the lone villager will be happy and excited to start the community again. After you've done the Fight Club quests in Uzhitz, Ratai and Sasau, the last one will be available inside Skalitz, near where Henry practiced with the wooden swords in the beginning. 3 people will be here dressed as Cumans. The self-proclaimed King of the Cumans likes fistfights, so if you beat beat all of them, you will have the chance to fight the king too. So we beat them up and fight the king himself, who is wearing full human armor with face covering and everything. After you win, they'll not give you your wager, instead all of them will attack. So you'll have to beat all 4 at once. But you can just kill them with a sword too, no one's here and I won't. The quest will not be completed this way and will just be stuck in your quest log, but you'll get all the loot still, so whatever. There's another DLC I haven't mentioned before, the Treasures of the Past, which adds treasure maps into the game. It adds some Warhorse Studios based armor into the game, but otherwise not really any story. It's basically like the fishing spots dotted around the map. You go there, loot it, and that's it. With the maps it's a bit more involved to figure out where it is, but let's be honest, most people will just look up the wiki. And I haven't talked about 2 small villages, Samopesh and Merhoed. They are near Sasau, and at this time they both belong to the Sasau monastery. They don't have any side quests that are not related to other quests though, so I talked about them elsewhere. But that's all the side quests not included in the main story. It was quite a journey, and after I showed you an appropriate demonstration of how it feels to get sidetracked about every little thing and completely ignore the main story for a while, we can finally go back and finish the second half of our adventure. So last time we left the main story, we just won the battle for Pribyslavitz and won a duel against Runt. In the overall story, we are here. We want to have revenge for our parents, but to get that guy, we need to get this guy, and for him, we needed to get Runt. And we found out about some counterfeiters who circulate fake coins in the area and are probably related to our next target. So we need to get to the bottom of this. Our lead was a merchant who transports these fake coins, and we need to find and question them now. We find the cart, but everyone is killed. There's a trail of blood leading away from the scene, which we follow to a charcoal burner's camp nearby. The leader of the camp confesses that they took the charcoal sacks the wagon was carrying, and they transported a wounded man from the scene, but they did not do the ambush. The wounded man is still alive, so we go to question him. He was a hired security for the merchant Manhart, and a knight attacked them and bested all of them single-handedly. When trying to ask about it further, there's commotion outside and an armored man is beating up the charcoal burner, searching for the coin. This seems to be our man, but when we try to confront him, he runs away. So you have a few options to do this. If you want, you can just fight him, but he is a formidable enemy and he probably knows some answers. So you can just let him go as well and search for him in Sasau later, where he was most likely headed. We find him at the inn in Sasau, but he doesn't want to talk in such a public place, so we agree to meet him that night near the pond nearby. This is obviously a setup and he wants to kill you. The option is there to still fight him, but we can also try to come to an agreement. His name is Ulrich and he's also after the counterfeiters, but he will not tell you about his employer. He is from Passau, a German city from which he followed the merchant here, as even there the fake groschen started circulating and it's causing problems to the Passau alderman. He knows Radzig and Master Feifar though and wants us to work together to uncover this mystery. He has a written document, a confession about how these forgeries are made, but he thinks an engineer like Feifar will get more out of this than a knight like him, so he tasks us to bring the document to Ratai. The document says the fakes are made in a monastery in Bohemia, which certainly matches Sasau. It also says that they use silver amalgam and copper to make the coins, and that's the lead we need to follow. So we need to find someone who works with these materials in Sasau. There's a painter at the inn who complains about being unable to buy quicksilver for his paints on account of some shortage in supply. The monastery overseer is in charge of this, so we ask him as well. He was threatened to sell the monastery's supply of quicksilver to some knights, or bandits more likely. We go to the handover spot and there are 2 bandits here. I think you're supposed to talk to them, but for me it didn't work, so I had to, So that lead is over, but we can talk with Master Feifar, who is in town incognito. He has an idea about trying to find the punch die the counterfeiters use to mint the coin. The only person who could make this is the Master Engraver, who we talked to when we needed that crown for Lady Stephanie. He doesn't really know anything, but he talks about his apprentice who disappeared. And if you open the locked chest in the workshop, you can find some sketches of his too that depict some coins. So the apprentice is sus enough, we need to find him. He was supposed to frequent the bathhouse, so we asked there. The girl the apprentice liked got kidnapped. There is a side quest too to save her, but it's optional. which was also the work of the bandits. But anyway, we find Florian at home. He confesses pretty easily and tells Henry that Rapota, the one leading the operation in town, follows him everywhere he goes, so we can find him wherever Florian goes. But first we also need to find who works with copper. We hear talk in town that the monastery blacksmith bought up all the copper, but he denies it. Ulrich also talks about that he heard neighbors cannot sleep because this blacksmith works all night. He will deny it, of course, but you can catch him working at night, beat it out of his son, or even just find the copper in the shed behind his workshop. But he doesn't know much, he's just being threatened, so we go back to find Rapota. We go with Florian to work next day, and sure enough, Rapota will be there. When confronted, he tries to run, but that will not work. He tells us that the counterfeiter's workshop is in the Skalitz mines, and also mentions a Hungarian nobleman who was there sometimes. So if you remember our chart about the targets, we are on the right track. We notify Ulrich, and the two of us go there to clean it out. We kill like 10 of them, and inside we find Sir Ježek, who Rapota was serving. The old man instantly wants to kill him, but Henry wants to take him to Rattay. Henry can convince him though to abandon his quest and former masters and be a traveling knight again. Ulrich is a knight without allegiance and he doesn't have any personal motivations against Kobila, so he accepts. Also his previous employer might kill him after his identity has been found out, so it's best for him to disappear. So we get Sir Ježek into custody and go back to Sir Radzig. Turns out Ježek only wants to talk to us, so we go to his cell to get some information possibly. Ježek was recruited into the organization in Sasau and a foreigner named Eric was giving him commands and put him in charge of counterfeiting. This Eric is high up, but Ježek thinks he's not the main guy. But the main thing is, someone is recruiting armed men in Sasau for reasons yet unknown to us. Radzig wants us to find the recruiters and the people behind the amassing army. At this point, Henry's cover story is supposed to be that he's just a village boy looking to make some money. But we already completed all the side quests and he has basically the best gear available in game, so there's a big disconnect. But we ask around about the recruiters with this excuse. Behind the Tanner's house, there's supposed to be some local youngsters practicing brawling. They might know something. They agree that if we win against them, they will tell us about the recruiters. We win using our special move, and they'll talk about the light in the church in the evening. If it's there, we're supposed to go in, pray, and wait for them to show up. You can get the same information from Miller Simon if you completed his quest before. The recruiters in the church are interested in Harry but want him to prove his worth first. They want us to kill someone in the monastery itself. This guy called Pius is supposedly hiding from them after running away. Pius was one of the guys at Neuhof too, a part of Riki's gang, so this whole thing is really starting to connect. He's inside the monastery as a monk, so Henry has to sneak in somehow to achieve this. They also can't describe him in detail, so we will need to figure out which of the monks he is ourselves. So they are basically like, hey new guy we just met, you need to plan and execute a perfect assassination mission into one of the most well-guarded places in the region. Do they have a hitman mission for everyone? The brawlers said they are taking anyone who's willing to fight, so probably just for us. But anyway, so starts one of the most ambitious quests in Kingdom Come, and consequently one of the buggiest parts of the whole game. There's a lot of ways this can go, and a lot of ways you can progress, and a lot of side quests inside the monastery as well that you can only do during this quest. They spend months during development just with the planning of the monastery's layout and studying how the monks lived in the time period, so it's an incredibly complex section, a game within a game so to speak. Let's start with how to get in. You can sneak in, kill him, take his dice you need as proof, and leave. At first, this didn't work for me though, because instantly after killing him, a legion of guards spawned who instantly knew he was dead, so I couldn't do anything. They also magically knew I was the killer, so they just arrested me. You can just jump in through the scaffolding too and start murdering, but the same problem with the guards. And now you have a bunch of locked doors too that stand between you and a quick escape. Radzig also wants you to not kill Pius, but to take him alive for questioning, so that's another way to deal with the situation. The intended way to enter is to go undercover and join the monks yourself. We will be able to observe their daily routine, get to know the characters, and slowly figure out who our target is. It should work as a hitman mission if some bug will not prevent us from doing it. Spoiler, it will. Henry cannot just join though, you need a lot more paperwork for that, but we hear about some nobleman who is supposed to join soon. He is being forced to do it though, and he's spending his last worldly days drinking in the tavern. We can come to an agreement with him. We steal the paperwork and their money from his guardian. We give him the money so he can escape, and we can keep the document so we can enter the monastery in his name. The brother outside receives us as Carl, and he doesn't recognize us even though we talked to him before as Henry, and we did all these quests around here. They surely must know by now who Henry is, but they don't. We put all our gear into a chest outside, put on the monk's habit, and Henry is officially a brother from this point on, for a while at least. The ceremony where we take our vows turns awkward though, as Henry doesn't know anything about the Order of Saint Benedict or its customs. Luckily, one of the other novices helps us, and we are welcomed as Brother Gregor into the monastery. The guy who helped us introduces himself as Antonius, and he is supposed to give us a little tour of the surroundings and an intro to what a monk's life is like. The interior of the monastery is wonderful as well. Just like the noble homes, you can find a lot of little details if you look around. For example, the cloister murals are incredibly detailed. In real life, it's rare to see them in such a complete condition, so it's mind-blowing to walk through it as it might have looked in the Middle Ages. After the tour, we have some free time to ask around, but from tomorrow we have to obey the rule of Saint Benedict and follow the daily schedule strictly. We get a note of this we can refer to later, but the quest marker will always tell you where to go on normal difficulty. And by the way, the names of some of the monks come from surviving records of monks living there in real life. So for example, John and Nevelas are future abbots of the monastery. I like the idea of this quest a lot, and my first time playing this was by far the most memorable part of the game for me. If you've been on this channel before, you know I like the scribes and monasteries type of historical fiction instead of the knights and kings type, and nothing even comes close to the monk simulator gameplay this quest offers. It's fascinating how well it conveys the feeling of being cut off from the secular world, how it feels to let go of all your possessions, and how suffocating it could be to adhere to the strict and plain life of a Benedictine monk. You can get to know these people, their internal politics, their hierarchy, and with a bit of snooping around, even their backstories. And honestly, I tried completing this to get footage of all of this, but it's still so bugged I can't make it work in a way that makes sense for this video. I love the idea of this quest, and I truly appreciate that they tried, because the parts where it works were my most memorable moments in the game, but like 70% of the time it will not work as intended. So I will just list out some things that can happen here and characters I found especially fascinating. And as an example of what I mean by bugged beyond comprehension, in the end I'll also show away how this quest can completely break your save file. So let's start with some positives. I really like the fact that you can roleplay as a monk. I've been to a lot of monasteries before, but I'd never really experienced the Benedictine one like this, actually following their routine as one of them. Here, it's kind of doubly detached, because you are pretending to be Henry, who is also pretending to be a monk. But still, living according to the Benedictine timetable is no joke and a fascinating experience in a video game. You get to see what Ora et Labora, pray and work truly mean in a person's life. They are not idle at all. Every aspect of their life is tightly scheduled so they can truly serve God as the main focus of their life. And a really interesting tension is introduced into this, as you as Henry are not here to give yourself up and lose yourself in service. You have things to do, and the monastic timetable is more of a problem you need to work around, and not a pillar that gives a comforting structure to your life. And I think this tension is what makes a lot of people hate this quest. The feeling of losing your freedom and being confined are all ever present here. And even though the loss of your character is not as bad as in the Theresa questline, it is there nonetheless. You are still Henry, but you can do most things you would want, which is what makes this quest so unique, but also so annoying to deal with for some people. And you'll have a lot to do in between your chores, as you're here to investigate the novices in the monastery. And here you can meet one of the few gay characters in the game. We hear about the circators drinking in the cellar at night, so we go to investigate. You can join them or just leave and promise not to tell, but either way, they will talk about how Brother Lucas, one of the other novices, knows about them and they're making his life hell in the monastery. They are the police here inside, so they can punish anyone for any reason, and they are not afraid to use this power on us if we snitch. When talking to Lucas about this, he asks us to stop them tormenting him, so we can just threaten the Circators with physical violence and they'll back off. But also they'll mock Lucas for being a quote sodomite sinner and warn Henry to be careful not to be lured in by him into sin. Lucas so far hasn't talked about his past as he wanted to forget it, but now he will talk about it a little bit more. When his family wanted to find him a wife, he told his father he prefers men and they sent him here. He's happy about it, even grateful, and thinks it's God's way of testing him. That's why he doesn't talk to anyone and just keeps to himself, diligently doing his tasks. Henry can be non-judgmental to him, which I think would fit his character a lot. He saw so many things during his adventures that were unusual to him, but he always approached these other people with curiosity first. He never really questioned anyone and just helped people where he could. There's another option to call him someone led astray by the devil, but I don't like being mean to him. I prefer the Pentiment approach to this, to be honest. And I think his character is done well, because he shows how utterly soul-crushingly hopeless it must have been to be in his situation. He actually got out pretty well, and he's kind of safe in the monastery, but still the Circators learned about his past and bully him relentlessly. He was taught to hate himself and to take up as little space as possible, because if he stands out, he might be in even more danger. So he doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't have any friends, and tries to atone for his perceived flaw by his monastic duties, serving an order that is actively hostile towards him. You can even sneak into the abbot's room and read the novices' records, and it confirms they are suspicious and afraid of him, even though he does his duties exceptionally. But when Henry doesn't judge him for this, he's so relieved and happy about it. It might have been the first time in his life someone accepted him to any extent. I love this little side story, and I think it was done really well. There's a few other quests too, like getting a book from the prohibited books cabinet. You can get the key from another quest, finding all the hidden pages lying about, or if you're like me and already have broken into it, you'll have it instantly and it's just done. You can also find a hidden stash that contains some worldly goods, which you can use during the other objectives. The main goal inside is to get information about the 4 new novices and decide who Pius is. All of them are suspicious in their own way, but it's pretty obvious after a while that Brother Antonius, the one who helped us in the beginning, is the one we are looking for. You can kill him or even come to an agreement with him, and then you escape together. But I want to show here my first try on this mission during this playthrough, as I've never seen anything like this and it's really funny. So after the first mass of the first day, I confronted him about being Pius, because I already played the game and remembered he was the imposter. He got aggressive and we got into a fist fight right there in the church. No one seemed to care at all and he just died, corpse out there in the open, still no one cared. The main quest completed, but I was still inside, and the side quest telling me about the daily schedule was still active. No one cared about anything I did. I thought I was invisible, so I tried killing another monk to see what's gonna happen. This time the aforementioned million guards spawned and wanted to arrest me. They just kept on spawning during this conversation too. They ended up putting me in jail. Jail time put me out of the monastery, which would have been ideal. But the side quest still popped up telling me to do my chores inside. And after going for my gear, all the NPCs still talked to me like if I was a monk. And whatever I did, I could not complete the side quest, and it just kept popping up. Like the retire tourney, except instead of weekly, it was every few in-game hours, and I had to reload. So this is the kind of thing you can get into during this quest. I love that they try to do this complex game within a game, but so many things can break it completely still. What I ended up doing is not even talking to the noble in the inn. I just opened the side door, stealth killed the guy, and ran away from the spawning guards. I didn't have time to loot, but the game has a system with a side quest called Lost and Found. If you miss a key item, it will be transported to the church graveyard for you to collect. The in-universe explanation being the item in question was found on a corpse while doing the burial preparations. So either way, we collect the dice we need as proof, and so ends one of the most memorable parts of the game. We go and deliver our loot to the recruiters. You can also pay them and keep the dice, or just kill them and loot the information we need. But if we give them the dice, they will tell us the location of the camp. Before going there, we report to Hanush and Radzig. They are not happy about the developments and want to root the bandits from their camp. But first, they send us to scout out the location, just like we did before the Battle of Pribyslavitz. The camp at Rennik is a hill fort, much bigger and easier to defend than the previous hideout. Rennik might be out in the open, but the only way inside is through the front, where you have to climb a steep incline. The other sides are built on a cliff, so attacking this place will be much harder. After going in, a lot of side activities will become unavailable, so it's recommended to go finish anything you might still want to do before the scouting mission. With the special die in hand, we are welcomed in and sent to Eric. We heard about him from Rapota, so we're finally getting closer to our own goals as well. Before going there, Henry explores the camp, measures its weaknesses, makes some notes about how many defenders there might be, and maps the general layout. This will all help with the later attack. Eric wants to test our combat knowledge first, so he sends us to the combat master. He's the same guy we learned some moves from in the prologue, but luckily he doesn't recognize Henry. He says Henry seems familiar, but he doesn't force the matter, and we beat him again. We go back to Eric to report, but he has a visitor. It's István himself, who we also met in the prologue, and he probably saw Henry fighting at Pribyslavitz too, where he was watching from the forest. He unfortunately instantly recognizes Henry, so our secret scouting mission is foiled. He even has the sword we're looking for and taunts Henry with it. Henry tries to attack, but gets immediately knocked out and tied up for questioning. István starts with dropping a bombshell on Henry, namely that his real father is Sir Radzig Kobyla himself. I think it was already pretty obvious something was going on, and this father reveal thing is kind of a cliche, but it still works in the story, because otherwise all the promotions and special attention given to Henry wouldn't make sense. If he was really just a blacksmith's son, his career would not have been possible at all. But I think most people like Hanush and Divish must have known, or at least heavily suspected this. It comes as a surprise for Henry because he is so inexperienced. And this twist also works because the whole motivation of Henry is now in question. He set out to avenge a person who he thought was his father, and now he doesn't want to accept this new information. István wants a ransom for Henry, and he's very assured in his position. He was behind the counterfeiting as well and was using the fake coins to hire mercenaries. Now he thinks he has the bigger army and says that only Sigismund's force could defeat him now, but the Hungarian king pays him. He wants to take this region for himself because he thinks Sigismund would let him keep it in exchange for helping to defeat Wenceslas's allies, namely Radzig himself. István and Eric leave, and Henry is left with a henchman who beats him up pretty bad. When he wakes up, he finds himself in the company of an unexpected ally. It's Zbyszek from Skalitz, the guy who sent Rant on us in the beginning. He is not happy with his life as a bandit and he wants out. So he needs the help of Henry, and he's our only chance as well. We agree to flee together and he unties Henry. We go to Eric's room to gather our belongings and sneak up to a hole in the wall where they throw out the waste. So we jump into a literal pile of shit, but make it out down the slope and escape together with Zbyszek. We report back to Radzig and Hanush in Ratai, and they want to attack tomorrow night. Henry's job is to go to Talmberg and tell Sir Divish to get all his men ready for the battle. This is the first time he and Radzig talk in person since the Dead Revelation, and from this point on, both of them will awkwardly acknowledge that they are related. And yes, it seems like everyone knew already except Henry. As Radzig outranks him militarily, Divish agrees to send the men, and he wants to leave as few behind as possible, so Talmberg is mentioned to be barely defended after we leave. This is what we call foreshadowing. But we ride out with Sir Divish to our biggest battle so far in the game. Now is the time to report our findings from scouting, which will be instrumental in forming the attack plan. Hanush gives a passionate speech about the atrocities the enemies committed against the region, and the battle starts. In gameplay terms, it's not much different from the Pribyslavitz fight. You can just watch them fight and the battle will progress on its own. You can loot or marvel how the AI tries to handle the battle system with so many combatants, but our army will slowly but surely push and take the fort. When we reach the upper lodgings, we find no evidence of either István or Eric. Investigating the place, we find out that their main goal was to take a castle. A captive says they took most of the men and left, and the noblemen have a foreboding that their target must be Talmberg. And to confirm this, a scene plays. István and a few men pretend to be wounded at the Talmberg gates, which they open for them. Lady Stephanie personally comes out to greet them and invites them in. Once inside, they drop the facade, and the rest of the army marches in to open the doors. István is so cartoonishly evil here, he really reviles in doing this, even though before he seemed to mostly care about power. Now he's doing it because he enjoys being evil too. Maybe he was always like this, and this is just where his true personality comes forward. When Divish and the others arrive, Talmberg is already lost basically. Redzig rides into the castle himself, but Henry remains in the outer fortification to defeat the enemy who are still fighting outside here. Lady Stephanie and Redzig are captured in the meantime, so we have no options but to retreat for now. Divish is the commander in this new situation, and understandably he doesn't want to siege his own castle. It's hard to attack up front because of the drawbridge and the portcullis. Drawbridges can have spikes under them, so falling into the pit is not ideal. So Robert suggests a stealth mission. A few men scaling the walls and sneaking out with the hostages. Henry obviously volunteers to be a part of this, and so preparations start. They recommend Henry to wear lightweight and dark clothing, but I'm not sure it matters actually, or maybe my stealth was so high at this point, but this was my outfit and it was fine. Capon is here too. He says he's got stealth experience by sneaking out of the castle every night and also wants to keep an eye on Henry. He will serve as our sidekick for the mission. We scale the ladders, dispose of the guards, and follow Capon to where the hostages are assumed to be. Only the commoners are here though, and while talking about our next step, we're spotted too. Capon is hit with an arrow.
Fuck my ass!
And we have to carry him out personally, so we leave without achieving anything. Divish realizes now that the only option left is to siege the castle. He is torn because it's his home and rebuilding it will cost time and of course money. His internal struggle is really well captured with him looking at his own castle in silence. And if later Sigismund's army comes back, a damaged castle will not be enough to defend, but he decides to build a trebuchet. Master Feifar is tasked with building it, and he doesn't seem too sure about being able to do it alone. He is a mining engineer after all, and Henry, still wearing his nitrate clothes, is tasked with helping around the siege camps with anything they might need. The siege was set up in a very short time, so the logistics of all of this is very haphazard. They don't have enough food or drink, they need pitch for setting fire to the defenses, they need potions to help the soldiers be energized, and they need a priest and a physician. Master Feifar also needs help with the trebuchet. Most of this is optional, but let's go through it. Getting the meat is easy, you just buy it or hunt it yourself and bring it to the quartermaster. For the alcohol, you talk to innkeepers and convince Andrew to send over a few barrels. The charcoal burners will also help with the pitch, since Henry helped them with ginger during the previous main quest. For the priest, we obviously ask Father Godwin, who accepts, and for the physician, it's going to be Nicodemus from the monastery infirmary. For the potion, you can get it brewed, buy it from vendors, but you can make it yourself too. Remember, with a high enough alchemy, you can auto-complete potions, so you don't need to repeat the process manually 60 times. Feifar wants to get help too. He heard of Konrad Kieser being in Sessa recently, and we could really use his help. He was in real life a military engineer. He was with Sigismund in Nicopolis and settled after in Bohemia to live in exile. He wrote a very famous book, Belli Fortis, about war and war machines. At this time, people were mostly reliant on precedent, and it was unusual to be this innovative. And he had a lot of ideas and detailed drawings. It's really worth it to look through the whole digitized book. So with his help, we are sure to succeed. He's going to be staying at the custodian's place in Sessa. You can talk to the charlatan, by the way, about where he stays, even though because of the side quests, the charlatan is not even in Sessa anymore. Anyway, we find him, and Konrad Kieser is voiced by Brian Blessed, and it's one of the best performances of the game. He's also such a good character IRL.
My relationship with games. The thing is, I do voiceovers in England, and I've done several PlayStations, which are incredibly popular.
He's working on a book here, his opus he calls it. this is for sure the Bellifortis. He was critical of Sigismund after Nicopolis, so he was banished and is kind of hiding here. He's also here to help with the monastery's constructions, as he needs the money to fund this book of his. So he can't leave, and we need to find a way to get him out of this contract that binds him to the building site. There's a few ways to do this. You can just threaten him with violence and he'll go instantly. You can steal the contract and forge the abbot's signature so he can sneak out for a few days, or steal the builder's money so they can't pay the wages, and then pay some back to him to rent Kieser out for a few days, so to speak. When we get back to tell him he can leave, Kieser is very agitated and he thinks Sigismund's assassins are after him for his criticism after Nicopolis. He saw someone sneaking about in the gardens at night, so we check it to calm him down. Sure enough, someone's there messing with the door, and he provides a messy cover story. You can just kill him and Kieser will be glad to join you to the siege, but you can believe the attacker too and let him go. If you do, the guy will follow Kieser to the camp and try to attack him there. He will most likely die from the guards and Kieser will not be happy with you. But with that, we've completed all side activities here and we just need to wait for the trebuchet to be completed. The first shot is not the most successful, so we have to wait a bit more. And now a scout reports that the army of Havel Medak is on its way. If you remember in history, he was the guy who imprisoned Sir Divish before the events of the game, and also the one who originally raised Pribyslavitz. So we haven't seen him before, but we have a score to settle with him. Divish wants to meet them before they even reach Dornburg, and devises a battle plan that might actually work. Henry will be part of an ambushing force made up of Skalitz men. When the enemy marches nearby, Henry will need to give the attack order, which is a big step up again. He is basically leading this band of soldiers. Another one of those big battles starts, where you can just sit back and watch if you want. And after defeating the marching enemies, we even capture Eric, István's right hand we met at Rennek. Before we can interrogate him, we need to run back and defend the trebuchet. And here is where you can still see the Dornburg racehorse if you left him there, completely unbothered, moisturized in his lane, etc. We win the battle and Henry suggests now that we have Eric, we can exchange the hostages for him. And Henry implies here that István and Eric might be very intimate, based on nothing at all. Even as valuable to István as Lady Stephanie is to Sir Divish, but the exact nature of their relationship is unclear, so they decide to get that info from Eric himself. Hanush tries but doesn't achieve much, so Henry tries and he enjoys how the situation is flipped now from the interrogation at Rennek, and he's in charge, asking the questions this time. Almost all the questions require a skill check, so good thing we did all those side quests because we will pass all of them and get their backstories. István and Eric are both orphans who ended up in Sigismund's service. István's parents were killed by the Ottomans, so he started killing them and Sigismund liked this. István killed Eric's parents and then took care of him like a father, which is how they met. And now they seem to be very important to each other. And after a few more questions, Henry asks him outright if they are lovers. And turns out they are, which comes completely out of the blue. Outside the few snarky comments in the last few cutscenes, which could have been interpreted as just boys' locker room talk, it was not set up in any way. And I think there has to be cut content around this story thread, because it comes out of nowhere and goes nowhere. And the only reason this works is that the plot needed them to be gay, so Eric is important enough for a hostage exchange. I think there should have been a scene in Rennek, so for example, when going for our gear, they are still in the room and think they are alone, so they speak intimately, or caress each other like lovers, or even kiss sloppy style, I don't know.
This is very telling of what I like about cinema.
And then Henry knows about it and can blackmail him here. So it's an actual story arc that's more complex than this.
The stronger dog fucks the bitches.
And not just a random conversation that needs to happen for the story to move forward. Having a gay nobleman in this time period in a rural place is such an interesting premise, especially with their backstories. I wish they had done more with it. But again, they talked about having to cut a lot of content. Like in the Gallows Brothers, Matt and Fritz just randomly turn into marauding bandits out of nowhere, and I think this part too was heavily affected by the time limits of development. We end up doing the parlay, but István doesn't want to agree to the exchange. While deliberating our options, a scout reports that Margrave Jobst is on his way. He is also a historical figure, a cousin to Wenceslas and Sigismund. He changes sides quite frequently, so Hanush and Divish are not exactly sure about his current allegiance, but at the moment he seems to be on Wenceslas's side, so our side. But either way, Divish decides to start bombarding the castle, and Henry has the honor of firing the first shot. This time the shot lands and a few days of constant shooting starts. While we wait, we have the chance to find some of the enemies who fled and clear out their camps. Stragglers in the woods, if left unharmed, could attack or beg during the siege, so it would be preferable to deal with them before. The camps are easy at this point, but you could also just find them and tell the location to Robard, and they will take care of it. But after we sleep, repair everything, and stock up on potions, we are ready to begin the final battle. The army gets into formation, Capon, Hanush, Robard, Bernard, Divish, all the Avengers are here, and we storm the castle. We start with climbing the ladders, which is incredibly cool, and this is the closest the game gets to the large-scale battles that they advertised in the Kickstarter video. We fight on the battlements, clearing everything in our way, and meet up with the other groups in the courtyard. At this point we basically won and no enemies remain. Only István and the 2 noble hostages remain locked up in the tower. Now he's in a position where he has to agree to the exchange. Divish also promises him safe passage to the borders of his territory, which Henry is not happy about. Remember, we still need the sword from him. But he cannot do anything about it. The agreement is made, István even taunts him with the sword, but they ride away. And since no one trusts anyone, Redzig rides with István and Eric until they reach the border, and Henry and Capon ride after them to make sure they release the hostage as promised. We get some friendly banter between the two again, and we'll have the time to appreciate how much they both grew since the beginning of the game. They are fully capable, fearless soldiers now, veterans who are also comfortable in the higher politics of older nobles. And with the reveal about Henry's real father, they are more equal socially as well, both having noble blood. This really emphasizes both of their journeys and their friendship that developed. We find Sir Redzig in the middle of the fields. Capon and his men leave to chase István a bit more, and we are left with Redzig, looking at the ruins of Skalitz, a full circle from the beginning of the game. He's kind of remorseful about not telling Henry before. Turns out his adoptive father, the blacksmith, knew about Redzig and still took him and his mother in. He had an adventurous life, fighting in a war, living in Kuttenberg, and finally settling in Skalitz. So probably that's why he was so dismissive of Henry's adventuring ambitions. He lived it and found that lifestyle not to his liking. Either way, he raised Henry as his own and allowed Redzig to keep an eye on him too. A beneficial agreement to everyone involved. They talk about their disappointment too, about not being able to achieve revenge, but they will not give up and are determined to still try in the future. Riding back, they see Margrave Jobst and his men riding towards Rattay as well, which sets up the epilogue, and the main story is over. The credits play. In the after credits scene, Henry has a conversation with his father about letting go. For me though, the subtitles were from Johanka's trial for some reason, which is such a great ending because it encompasses a lot about this game. The emotional great scene being imperfect, the impact broken by some minor bug that is funny but still works against the story itself. And so what did we achieve? Well, not much, to be honest. The story is not finished and the DLCs haven't really fixed that either. Was it unrealistic for Henry to want revenge on Markwart in such a short time? Sure, but we still have a very different ending from where I expected it to go. And I'm not sure this is a good thing. It feels disappointing in a way, and the main storyline is left with an unsatisfying cliffhanger, but the devs seem to have been aware of this at least. The main quest was all over the place, constantly changing who we are after, new antagonists being introduced and then defeated, only to learn that there's a new guy now, one step up the chain. And then when we went high enough to be after an actual noble, still not our original target, he slips away and the game just ends. In the last few quests, nothing really went our way. We won at Rennick, but got Talmberg captured. We tried the Night Raid, but failed. We tried the Trebuchet, but failed. We stopped the reinforcements and even got someone captured, but the negotiations failed. We took back Talmberg, but the bad guys were allowed to escape. And this series of letdowns is not a good note to end the story at. The only cathartic thing we can cling to is that Redzig and Stephanie survived and we get to try our revenge later. I mentioned this before, but the game really reminds me of Shenmue, where there's a big, powerful evil guy we need to defeat at one point, but the protagonist just goes on infinite side quests and always just barely comes short of defeating the main antagonist. In Shenmue, they always set up the ending that implies a satisfying confrontation in the sequel, but it never happens because they have so much side stuff to tell. They want Ryo to grow up to the challenge and become a true martial artist through various experiences, so he has a realistic chance against another master, but the story meanders so much they forget the need for a satisfying payoff. I hope the Kingdom Come sequel or sequels will not fall into this trap. So the revenge plot is kind of disappointing, but there's something that works a lot, and that's Henry's journey. After all this time, you really feel like he's come a long way and he earned his place as a soldier in these last battles. Even if some promotions he might have gotten too early because of nepotism and because he's a protagonist of a video game, he went through so much that gave him the experience needed to become a swordsman. He stands his ground in a fight, he can do scouting missions, spying, and all kinds of wild adventures that prove beyond a doubt that he is an asset to whoever he is serving. And that's why I think the story being incomplete is not that big of a problem. The journey itself is so satisfying that it doesn't matter that the ending is a letdown. But this is going to be a challenge in the sequel because now Henry is already established and you can't repeat this feeling of going from a nobody to a knight. Now they have to tell the story of a knight proper. But the solution seems to be easy. They have to finish the story in KCD2. Or if they want, maybe a trilogy, but Henry's revenge story needs an ending. And if that happens in a sequel not so far away, then the disappointment at the end of the first one is just a problem of expectation. I expected the game to end with a showdown between Henry and Markward, because I thought in the beginning that's what was being set up. If I knew it was set up to be a trilogy, for example, I would have completely different reactions to the whole story, because then I would know they want to take the slower approach to storytelling, and this was just the first act. There's no chance of actually defeating an army commander in this one game. You will do that in a later entry. Because I read the books and knew the story, when I watched Doom Part 1 in the cinema, I was constantly thinking, how the hell are they going to finish this in the time remaining? And turns out they didn't. The movie just ended at a random point. I was avoiding any news, so I thought Part 1 meant the first book, all of it, not Part 1 of 2 of the movie adaptations of the first book. So I left disappointed. This is the kind of feeling I had with Kingdom Come. I think adding the quest Vengeance that was constantly there as an objective gives a false impression of what this game is and should not have been included. And before release, I would have liked more marketing based on how this is just the first part of Henry's story. I understand doing that as a new, smaller studio's first game is not the best strategy, so they kind of just hinted at it here and there in the video updates. But for me personally, I went into it expecting something completely different from what it actually was. And I think this is the answer for the original question I had in the beginning of this video. This was my main source of disappointment at the ending. There's a short epilogue after the post-credit dream that sets up the sequel. Margrave Jobst arrived in Rethei, and we have a meeting with him and all the important noblemen of the region. Henry is in a completely different league now. This is not regional politics anymore, they are talking about the king for the whole country. This whole affair with Wenceslas and Sigismund is so complicated, I'm not even gonna try to cover it. Even by reading about it, I was confused, and our characters are confused as well.
This is starting to make my head spin.
These machinations take place after the main quest, and to be honest, it doesn't have a lot to do with this game's story. If you want to hear about the details though, you can talk to the nobles, and it's a literal 20 minutes history dump that the editors wanted to cut a lot, but it ended up staying in. And there's a lot of new info thrown at you here.
Rupert of the Palatinate? That's a name I hadn't heard before today.
Well yeah, that's kind of the problem. The main point is they are organizing a revolt against Sigismund with noblemen from a few different countries, and Jobst wants to recruit us into his scheme. It's a complicated web of alliances and motivations though, so we need to find out what the League of Lords' plan is. They are the noble opposition to King Wenceslas. Capon and Henry volunteered to go to Lord Burgov at his castle to find out. So their quest is to deliver the letter and be back in a few days. So we ride off to this easy mission and the game ends. But based on the trailers that are out for the sequel, this affair is gonna turn into a whole other adventure in itself. So at the point of writing this, we don't really know much about what's gonna happen in the sequel. Henry's been mewing, that's for sure. In the trailers there are familiar faces like Godwin, and it seems like Capon and Henry's relationship is going to get a much bigger focus. There's also new weapons, and larger scale battles are still a selling point, but this time they might actually do it. And Markward was visible in one of these trailers as well, so who knows, maybe we'll meet on the battlefield. So I wanna mention a few points I hope they will do, a wish list so to speak, not really predictable. contradictions. First, I'd like the main story to be more focused, and fewer quests where we set out to do one thing, and to do that we need to do another, and for that we need to do etc, etc. This happened a lot in this first game, and I hope they'll not do as much in the second. Next, I hope the revenge story moves forward significantly or even concludes. I think a cool way to do it, for example, would be Henry getting revenge on Markworth in 2, and in a third, then maybe he meets Wenceslas himself or even helps in his escape from imprisonment to move even more up the food chain. I don't really want to spoil what happens historically to these characters, maybe you don't want to know, but there's a lot of cool stories that could be told from the point of view of Henry if he moves up to that level. If he achieves revenge in the second, a third game could be fully about him being a noble and navigating those waters. And I hope they will not fix all of the bugs, because some of them are really what give a soul to the whole game. Just funny stuff like people sleeping open-eyed or knocking them out and they look at you, or the weird behavior of the NPCs sometimes. I think these add to the immersion as well, since you have to fill in the gaps sometimes with your imagination. The game looks more realistic than other RPGs like Baldur's Gate 1 or something like Citizen Sleeper, but because a lot of the things are depicted in an incomplete, imperfect way, or a lot of characters look similar, you still have to imagine a lot. I love this, and I hope they'll not try to be more photorealistic in the next game. The second game is set to be taking place mostly in Kuttenberg, which is another famous mining town, but a much larger city than Skalitz. So I'm also really interested how a huge city like that compares to the more rural setting of the first game. Because of the large number of people, Henry has a lot of chance to meet a lot of different types of people, and I hope they'll do some interesting quests with that to give a contrast to the village life of the first one. Even the types of clothes and armor we could get significantly increased. They are very meticulous about historical realism, so with the rural setting, they were more limited with the scope of stories they could tell. Like the characters in the Theresa DLC were very one-dimensional. This could change with a big city like Kuttenberg, where a large variety of things could happen. The studio itself expanded a lot, and probably they have more resources as well, so I hope they will take the time to pack the city full of detail. Maybe they'll even have an illuminated manuscript as an in-game book that you can read. Well, one can hope. So that's the video. But wait, don't you have a feeling that something is missing? Like something important has not happened yet? But the story of Kingdom Come... Ah, there it is. It took a Herculean amount of restraint not to do this every time. Also because it was mostly me talking over the scenes, if you haven't played yourself, you missed some of the repeating voice lines, which are integral to the experience, so here's a best of compilation.
We haven't a pot to piss in.
Every Tom, Dick and Harry can read nowadays.
Hey, Henry's come to see us!
When I started working on this, it was a much smaller project. I chose this game because it was old and I wanted to have plenty of time to work on it at my own pace. Obviously, in the middle of doing that, they announced that the sequel will come out this year, so in the end I did have a vague sense of urgency to complete it before that comes out. Also shout out to this channel, because while writing this I was exclusively listening to Lotro music compilations and I don't know what I would do without them. But otherwise, I'm happy I did this. Playing KCD on release, I had faint memories about being disappointed, but after spending so much time analyzing it, I think I thoroughly understand why I felt that way. And I also feel like I understand now what makes this game great. Just like the developers, I also have a lot of nostalgic memories about Eastern European history movies from the last century, and overall I think they did a wonderful job of implementing that type of story into a video game. Playing it was a lot of fun and I'm excited for the sequel. Next video will be a shorter one on a historical game, and the video after it will be a longer one on a non-historical one, or at least this is the plan. Thank you very much for watching the whole thing. Like, comment and subscribe if you want to see more like this. Or you can watch my other videos right now if you're interested. Like the Pentiment one on the screen, that's even longer than this one was. Wow. But anyway, see you in the next one.
Jesus Christ be praised.